I count promises for a living, not coins, not bodies. I'm Rhea Lynn, Omega bookkeeper of Ironville Keep, and tonight the castle lied. The tunnel siren groaned, one long note that made the ink in my bottle shiver. Ironville runs on schedules and oaths. Alarms don't cry unless the wolves at the docks see something that could snap the night accords. I pressed my palm to the flagstones. The city below had a pulse, ferries, generators, the thin music of the casinos. It stuttered. Steward Holt appeared in the doorway. "Seal the room." "Don't," I said, already rolling the ledger cart aside. "If it's Gate 2, raiders will use the storage spur and drive the patrol into a blind turn." He sniffed, brow pinching. "You smell that?" "Lamp oil, wrong grade for our lanterns." He didn't argue. Holt tugged the bell rope twice, Omega for move quiet. The walls woke, shutters snicked, trays vanished, pages slipped into alcoves. I yanked the canvas off my chalk map. People think bookkeeping is columns. In Ironville, it's how money breathes. I sketched fast barge arrivals, cask counts, salt requisitions. The kitchens had requested double salt this week. Salt blinds a wolf's nose if you shake it where you shouldn't. Whoever planned this knew our habits and copied them. "They'll try the North Cistern," I said. "Mid-arch, lazy ambush." Holt's mouth thinned. "I'll send a runner." Bootsteps braked at the door. Jace Vane, the beta's heir, slid in, rain in his hair, sword at his hip, breath steady. He took in the map with one look. "Cistern?" he asked. "Yes." I shoved him a scrap, patrol numbers, 2 routes to pinch the arch. "No torches, starve the flame." His fingers brushed mine, a warm callus and 1,000 shared errands. "You shouldn't go down there." "I'm not," I lied. "Gate watch only." We both knew I was terrible at lying and good at listening. He tipped 2 fingers in the beta salute and ran. I grabbed my small ledger, the one I carry when I don't want anyone to know I'm looking, and took the service stare. The stones hummed with movement. Overhead, the Oathglass in the great hall spilled cold light through its grate. Some say it's only glass. My bones disagree. The mirror keeps our promises. I hear them crack before anyone else sees the first line. At the tunnel ring, 2 guards had a man pinned by his forearms. He wore our livery, eyes shot red. "I didn't know," he stammered. "I swear by the king." There, the shift. Most oaths land like a coin, clean, finished. His dragged, catching on something unsaid. A hairline fracture skittered through the air. I tasted it like a nail between teeth. "Cold room," I told the guards. "Not the infirmary." "Who are you two?" the tall one began, and the air changed shape. Aldrich Cade didn't need a crown to wear a corridor. The Alpha King moved like a quiet weapon, coat unbuttoned, hair damp, gaze exact. "Let her speak," he said, and the tunnel obeyed. "If he goes to the infirmary, someone will bless him out of consequence," I said. "If there's rot inside, their hands will be there." Aldrich's eyes flicked from the prisoner to me. "Narrow questions," he said, as if he'd already accepted my term. "Lock him." They hauled the man away. The mineral tang thickened. I pushed my sleeve back, found the worn tunnel map carved into stone, and chalked fast. Gate 2, right arrow, cistern, right arrow, mid-arch, right arrow, the slight dip where oil likes to run. My chalk whispered. "Report," Aldrich said. "Small raid, loud on purpose," I told him. "Oil to drive the patrol into a blind curve salted to kill scent and footing. Hit them low and push. If you counter through this service slot," I drew a second route up a narrow shaft, "you split pressure and steal their air." He watched like he was already learning. "Why bring a book to a knife party?" "Because the book told me where the knives would be." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Holt's numbers, girl." "Rhea Lynn," I said. He stepped closer. The lantern showed steel in his focus. "You said chapel hands." "Blessings are soft words that undo hard ones," I said. "If someone inside is pulling threads, they'll want their men washed clean." His attention sharpened, interest, not suspicion. "Walk." We didn't make 10 strides. The tunnel breathed wrong. Air should draw one way, pulled by the cistern's lung. Tonight it shoved back, warm through a narrow throat. I caught his sleeve and flattened us to the wall as a ribbon of fire slid around the curve, hugging oil across stone. Heat slapped my face. He caught my forearm, anchoring bone without bruising, body turned to take the heat. Behind the flame, steel scrapes, feet shifting, patient men at a bend. "Mid-arch," I whispered. "Stay," he said. I should have. I didn't. I slid along the wall, lifted my skirt, and found the cleaner's toehold up the service slot, dry and narrow. I pushed the ledger in first, then my shoulders. Stone-kissed ribs. From above the curve, I saw boots stacked too deep, waiting. I tapped two, pause, one, Jace's flank signal. A whisper answered from the dark. Good. Rice-fine salt dusted the bend. Sloppy. Anyone who's mopped our floors knows better. Aldrich appeared beside me at the grate, with no sound at all. "Don't do that," I breathed. "What am I not doing?" "Appearing." He scanned angles. He didn't ask how I'd found the hold or if I was sure. He measured the space and fit inside it. "On my count," I said. "They expect the main patrol. Let the flank breathe first." "Count." 1, airflow shifted, the oil guttered. 2, steel flexed, a nervous breath. 3. Everything moved at once. A gust from our side that starved the flame, the soft rush of bodies from the service run, raiders pivoting too late as Jace hit the blind angle. Close, quiet fighting, grunts, boots, a knife skittering. The sound a wolf makes when he's winning isn't a roar. It's the silence that follows. One raider broke and came straight for the grate, knife low. He didn't see me until his shoulder brushed the wall. I dropped the ledger. It cracked his wrist like a brick. The knife bounced into oil and vanished with a sulky plip. He lunged. Aldrich's hand shot through the grate, caught the man's collar, and lifted him clean. Jace tied the arms fast, eyes flaring when he saw me wedged in the wall. "You said you weren't coming," he murmured, like we were arguing over pastries again. "I brought the book," I said. "Of course you did." His jaw worked. "You all right?" Aldrich's grip still banded my forearm, heat steady. Alphas are built to count life in their hands. He let go when I said, "Fine." It felt like returning something I hadn't known I'd borrowed. The raiders went to their knees. Not dock scum, their gear too clean, boots too new. A metal pin on one collar caught the lantern. A stylized halo the chapel acolytes wear on feast weeks. I bent like I needed air and looked closer. The crossbar at the base of the circle had been filed, a hair thinner than it should be. Not a mistake, an edit. "Where'd you get that?" I asked lightly. "Looks new." The man's jaw set, the stubborn calm of someone whose lies have always been believed. "Gift from my sister. She scrubs for the chapel, I swear it." The words slid too smooth. A crack ran from his mouth to the pin, then jumped, just a snap, toward the keep, not the docks. My tongue went numb. That's how forged vows taste. Aldrich stepped into the hush like a ship out of fog. "Who sent you into my tunnels?" Not loud, not slow. "Speak plain, live longer." The raider lifted his chin. "I swear by the—" "Stop," I said, because if he bound that oath wrong, the crack would splinter and cut everyone breathing here. Faces turned. Even the stones listened. "Don't swear on names you don't own," I told him, soft as a kitchen at dawn. "Something simple. Who handed you the pins?" He blinked, thrown by the change in pressure. Then, low, like offering sin to split, "A lady," he said. "The kind that smiles in rooms with windows." Plenty of ladies in Ironville. Only a few know the tunnels breathe. I filed the phrasing under later. Holt arrived with more staff. Jace parceled men to mop oil, bind hands, haul the concussed. I slid out of the slot, brushed grit from my dress, and let my hands shake once now that danger wasn't shouting. Aldrich watched me, assessing without apology. "You knew the oil would be there." "The kitchen requisition doubled," I said. "The casino oil didn't drop. It had to go somewhere." "And the smell," he said. "And the smell." He stepped closer. Lantern light through his shadow, long coat, shoulders, focus like blade work. Up close he wasn't barred beautiful. He was exact. "You moved me out of the fire," he said, tallying an unexpected gain. "You didn't need moving." He held my gaze until the air felt like wire. I didn't look away. Omega girls with numbers don't get to spend our lives studying our shoes. Above us, the Oath Hall sighed, maybe wind, maybe glass remembering a promise. The chapel pin glinted on stone. I didn't pick it up. I've learned not to carry other people's vows in my pockets. Rhea Lynn, Aldrich said. Yes, Your Majesty. You'll work for me, publicly. My life made a sound only I could hear, a fine crack turning into a door. The mirror over our heads watched, and under my skin the future started counting. By the time we reached the Oath Hall, the keep had woken into ceremony. Torches burned in iron lilies along the walls, and the great Oathglass looked down from its frame like a pale moon trapped indoors. The floor was waxed to a mirror. The court filled the echo, Alpha, Beta, Omega households, merchants who pretended not to care, nobles pretending they weren't curious, clerics in neat lines like stitched seams. I caught the clean bite of beeswax, old stone, and a trace of something sweet, wine breathing in casks for the customary toast that ends any public vow. Holt moved along the Omega line, settling shoulders with a glance. Lysa Cade, the king's sister, stood near the dais in a coat the color of rain and an expression that said, "Try me." The Dowager Myra wore widow black like a threat you'd be wise to heed. Aldrich crossed the hall without hurry, and the room changed shape around him. No crown, no scepter, just that exact attention that makes space behave. The guards fanned, not for menace, but because men breathe easier when they can see the edges of a room. "Your Majesty," called Lord Cormac Vane from the Beta line, voice steady as stacked wood. "A binding at this hour." "Better clean than convenient," Aldrich said. He didn't raise his voice. It went everywhere. He tipped his head, and a herald stepped forward, red sash bright enough to bleed. "Ironville convenes under the Oathglass," the herald intoned. "We witness a royal appointment. The crown petitions the mirror for truth and the audience for memory." And then all of them looked at me. I am used to being the quiet one at the ledger table, the wallflower that knows the room by how it spends. Tonight the room stared back. Omega, their eyes said. Up here, the words slid across faces like oil. "Rhea Lynn," Aldrich said, speaking to me and to the glass and to the keep that hears everything. "Step up." My feet knew the way. I'd polished this floor enough to walk blind. I stopped at the bottom of the dais where the Oathglass could see my throat. The mirror is a circle as tall as two men, rimmed in old silver, faint veins running like frost under ice. When truth is sworn clean, it throws a single, thin sigil, one line, one memory. When lies bend inside the words, tiny cracks start a slow, quiet winter. The high matron Seraphine stood near the clerics, warm shawl, eyes too kind for a room that sharp. She made a little blessing motion in the air, nothing pushy. If I hadn't tasted Asterium in a corridor an hour ago, I'd have called it sweet. Aldrich didn't kneel. He never did at his own court. The court knelt to him. But he did set a palm against the rail between us, not to lean, only to show his hand was empty. "Hear the crown," the herald said, and silence placed itself carefully in the hall. Aldrich spoke without flourish. "Rhea Lynn," he said, and my name sat steady in his mouth. "I bind you as Oathbound auditor of Ironville. You will read what others do not. You will ask the narrow question. You will wake me when the mirror winter comes. You answer to the crown," he tapped the rail once, "and to the truth that outlasts it. No romance words, no claim language, work." The Oathglass breathed, a tiny shift like a sleeping thing turning. I lifted my chin. "I take the post. I count openly, write plainly, and make no theater with words. I report to the king and to the keep whose breath I know by its ledgers. I will not be made into a blade for petty hands." A whisper moved through the nobles at that last line. Omegas don't say petty out loud. Holt's mouth twitched and then flattened. Seraphine stepped forward a polite half-pace. "Child," she said, careful voice like warm bread, "would you like blessing oil on the brow? Tradition keeps rooms gentle." Aldrich's gaze slid her way, his voice did not. "We keep this clean, matron," he said. "Ink and glass." Her lashes dipped, apology in velvet. "As you will." The herald lifted a small mallet and tapped the silver frame once. The mirror's pale veins brightened. The hall held its breath. Oath, Aldrich said, just that single word to mark the start. I let my voice steady itself in my ribs before sending it upward. I swear, I said, to ask for the smallest truth that makes the largest lie fall. The Oathglass took the sentence and wrote a thin symbol the length of my palm across its heart, like a hair laid on water. Clean. The murmurs rose again, then quieted as the next part came due. Aldrich set his palm flat on the rail, the tendons at his wrist fine as wire under skin. I swear, he said, eyes on me, not the glass, to let the truth cost me what it costs, and to stop it before it costs the city. The mirror flared once, then thinned the light down into a line that ran parallel to mine. It's a good feeling when the glass agrees, like a knot loosening under the tongue. Done, the herald said, relief plain in the small release of breath he didn't think anyone heard. The Oathbound are recognized. The court will witness. Witnessing looks like nothing and feels like a wave. All those eyes change what they think you are. Aldrich turned to the room, not toward me, toward his people. This appointment keeps your tables full, he said. It is not a game for gossip. Omegas are not stepping where they shouldn't. They are doing what they always have, saving you from other people's mistakes. That line landed like a penny dropped in still water. The Omega household straightened. A couple of nobles bit their lips to hide expressions they didn't want seen. Lysa's chin tipped. Point for you, brother. The dowager's hand uncurled from her walking stick by the smallest degree. Long live the king, someone called, the kind of someone who wants his voice remembered on minutes, and the hall answered to the measure it ought. I exhaled slow. The echo faded. The ceremony ledger in my head ticked its last box, toast. Servants wheeled in the cask cart from a side door, the copper hoops polished to show off that someone had polished them. The wine is nothing important on paper, just what you pour so people feel finished. But tradition is a coin everyone likes the feel of. Holt's lads levered the first cask onto the tap cradle. The scent sweetened the air, a dark fruit, clean and old. Let the mirror witness the pour, the herald said, and a young acolyte carried the tray into the Oathglass's light, so the first cups would shine. On my right, Jace smooth-stepped out of beta line to me like he'd been doing it since we were 12, and I'd scuffed my knees stealing a ledger no one would miss. He looked neat for the hour. Hands scrubbed, hair orderly, sword quiet. Congratulations, he said, low, too calm. That voice you use to keep your own heart from behaving wildly. Those quiet eyes took inventory, my breathing, the ink smudge at my thumb, the new distance suddenly built between us and the rest of the room. You were there for the hard part, I said. The rest is chairs and speeches. He smiled with only half his mouth. You were always going to find your way to the front of a room, Rhea. Not like this. Exactly like this. Behind his shoulder, Lady Mara Vane looked like she was deciding whether to be proud of me or suspicious of the weather. Lord Cormac inclined his head, the beta way of saying I see it, and I will defend it in the morning when someone complains. From the Alpha Dais, Lysa made a tiny gesture like a toast with an invisible glass. The dowager did nothing, and made it clear she was doing nothing on purpose. The Oathkeepers moved in a pretty line to bless the air, not the cups, not us, just the idea of completion. Seraphine's shawl slid like a sigh. She did not look at me, she looked at the crowd the way a gardener looks at rain. Aldrich took the first cup from the tray and held it up to the Oathglass. The Oathglass cares about oaths, not cups. Still, we put the first silver rim into the light, because habit keeps halls gentle. I felt it before I saw it, the little cold crawl of oath sight along the inside of my wrist, like dipping a hand into meltwater. The mirror's veins fine-brightened, a perfectly clean response to perfectly normal ritual. And then, there, a thread of frost I wouldn't have noticed if every bone in me hadn't learned this room's breath. Not on the mirror. On the metal hoop of the cask itself when the tray bearer turned and the Oathglass light slid across it. A silver line spidered and vanished, as if it had been shy. I blinked, reached for nothing. The herald kept talking. The crowd shifted a fraction. Aldrich passed his cup to the dowager first, the small hierarchy that keeps wars from starting during dessert. The second cup lifted. It happened again. not a crack in the glass. A reflection of a crack where no crack should be, a spider web flashing over the curve of the wine cask when it hit the band of mirror light. Too delicate, too fast, not a craftsman's wobble, not a trick of wax. I taste lies like metal on my tongue. This tasted like resin and patience. "Rhea," Jace said, just my name, because apparently my face had forgotten to pretend it liked parties. "Wait," I breathed. My voice didn't go anywhere. I wasn't talking to people. I was speaking to motion. I stepped toward the cart as the third cup lifted. Holt's boy kept his hands smooth from long practice. The taps drip perfectly behaved. Seraphine's acolyte angled the tray into the middle of the mirror's glow, so everyone could see the pretty ripple of wine at the rims. The Oathglass threw a fan of pale across the copper. The spiderweb flashed, there and gone, white on red, like frost racing a window. Not on the surface. Inside the wood, stitched into the staves where someone with time and nerve could tuck thin strings of something that doesn't belong. The first clean fear since the tunnels walked itself down my spine. Not the noisy kind. The kind with math on it. Casks come up from cellars through 2 doors, both staff side. Chapel hands bless the dais. The Oathglass light only shows what it can see. "Rhea." That was Aldrich now, not a question, his attention cutting to the place mine had gone. I didn't touch the cask. You don't slap a fire you can't see. I shifted my stance a hair and lifted my palm, not high, not dramatic, just enough to mark the space with my body. "Harold," I said, polite as ink, "pause the pour." Seraphine's shawl stilled midsway, the only fabric in the room that forgot how to breathe. The word pause is a small word, but a court runs on them. The herald froze. Holt's boy went still in the way trained hands do. The acolyte blinked, caught between 2 duties. "What is it?" Seraphine asked, concern dress like comfort. "Child." I didn't look at her. Looking at the wrong person makes the room worse. I looked at the Oathglass. "May I ask a narrow question for the court?" I asked. Aldrich's answer was already moving through the room, a weather change in human shape. "Ask." I stepped a half pace, so the mirror's light fell exactly across the cask band. Has anyone other than Omega cellar hands touched these casks since they were sealed for service tonight? A question like that is a bracelet. It locks. People can wriggle. The Oathglass can't. Silence made itself neat. Holt cleared his throat. "Cellar hands only," he said, because it was his pride to say it. "No one crosses our chalk lines after the seal." The Oathglass stayed calm. No sigil, no crack. Holt's truth hung in the air like steam and vanished. I didn't let the court breathe yet. Has any blessing, oil hand word, been offered to these casks tonight? Seraphine's head tipped in something like puzzlement. "We bless rooms, child, not barrels." Acolytes shook their heads, gentle chorus. The Oathglass remained smooth. Jace's shoulder had angled in front of mine by the smallest amount a beta can get away with at a king's ceremony. It looked like nothing. It moved my body out of the exact line a thrown knife would take if someone in the balcony had poor impulse control. That's love without asking for a receipt. I lifted my hand and pointed, not touching, to the iron tap cradle, an ugly utilitarian support everyone ignores because it's ugly and utilitarian. 2 little beads of hardened, something glinted where the cask sat in the arms. The kind of residue you only see if you know what kitchen varnish looks like when it dries wrong. "Herald," Aldrich said, "call the court to stillness." "Still," the herald said, voice going long and low like a bell. I said, very soft, very plain, to the Oathglass because the Oathglass cares about how words fit. "Has anything been added to these casks that was not on the seller's ledger?" The mirror threw a thin line of light across the copper. For one fraction of a heartbeat, a little web chased itself over the band, white and bright and gone. Not a shatter, not a break. A hairline, the kind that starts nights that end badly. I tasted resin again. The asterium tang I'd smelled in the tunnels, dressed in wine and patience. The court didn't know what I'd just seen. The court felt it anyway, the way a room feels lightning count the air. Aldrich's fingers tapped once against the rail, like punctuation. He didn't look at the dowager or the matron or the nobles who hadn't learned yet that stillness saves lives. He looked at me. Rhea Lynn, he said, and the title he'd given me slid in behind my name like a spine. Call it. Stop the pour, I said. Seal the casks, no one drinks. The herald inhaled to argue courtesy with procedure. The dowager didn't move and froze everyone like a winter. Holt was already passing the quiet order omegas here without words. Jace's hand settled, casual as air, on the hilt he wasn't going to have to use if the room behaved. The acolyte lowered the tray. The hall held its breath. Somewhere in the hall, a nervous man coughed. Somewhere else. A woman said, surely, under her breath like the word could reverse a tide. Seraphine's shawl sighed when she shifted her weight, alarm wrapped in care so neatly you'd want to thank it for worrying correctly. And because halls love spectacle, the Oathglass gave us one more mercy of proof. As the servants eased the cask back into the cart's cradle, the light slid across the hoop, and the Oathglass washed pale light over the hoop, and for a heartbeat, a hair-thin frost raced inside the wood, stitching from stave to stave, there and gone. Not the mirror, the cask. Courts end with toasts. Wars often start there. The cart rolled away under seal and wax, guards flanking it like a moving wall. Aldrich gave a single nod, orders without words, then turned to the herald. Close the hall, he said. Omega staff with me. We moved as the echoes died. Holt took the left passage for the cellars, keys already in hand. I matched his pace until soft wool brushed my sleeve, and a voice that never splinters rooms found the seam in mine. Child, Seraphine said, a moment for gratitude. Blessings are small nets. You don't feel the pull until you're walking the way the hand suggests. I let myself be turned toward the chapel cloister, Jace falling in on my other side so quietly it looked like I'd chosen him as a shadow. The dowager watched us go. Lysa folded her arms and mouthed something like, be quick. The chapel holds its own chill. Candles soaked the air in beeswax and orange peel. A rope of incense smoked near the nave, pretty, harmless, yet under it lived another scent entirely. A faint, sweet metal breath that slid cool along my teeth. Asterium wears perfume like a good liar wears charity. Seraphine led us past the pews toward the little door off the sanctuary, the place acolytes keep cloths, chalices, bottles, extra tapers. You've had a night, she murmured, palm hovering but not touching my brow. Let the room be kind to you before you go counting again. I don't mind counting, I said. Of course you don't. Her mouth creased like a smile and then ungave it, the way you fold a handkerchief before anyone notices the stitch. Will you accept a simple blessing? I could have said no and made a scene. Better to say yes and make a note. She touched 2 fingers, light as ash, to my forehead. Oil-kissed skin, rose and grain, and something that left a tiny cold spot where warmth should sit. Not the oil, the air under it. Rooms are gentle, she said, when we let them be. Rooms remember, I said. Jace stood a half pace behind, posture easy, eyes busy. He didn't speak. He doesn't in chapels unless a life asks him to. Seraphine turned, guiding by absence, and the flow of bodies would have taken me back to the nave, back to hallway, back away from cellars. I paused instead, letting one heel click softly against the step. The little sound folded the silence just enough to be impolite. I need the chalice records, I said, simple as asking for salt. For the ledger. The ledger can sleep, she said, still kind. Numbers don't, I said. The door to the side room was nearly closed. I didn't look at it. I watched the tiny plume of incense at the altar instead, counting the way the smoke climbed, slanted, and thinned. Chapel air always moves one way here, pulled by the higher vents. Tonight it was dragged sideways, as if a second hunger worked behind a wall. Seraphine angled her body a thumb's breadth, turning the sight line of the aisle so the altar filled it. We keep no secrets in our cupboards, child, she said, almost laughing. You will find linens and polish and old wax and the names of donors who send us casks you don't like. I like donors, I said. I like to know which doors they like best. A soft clink came from the side room, too light for a bottle, too heavy for a pin. Someone inside placed metal on wood and then remembered that sound carries when you're nervous. The handle's iron had a smear that caught the candlelight, the sort of translucent residue you only see when varnish dries wrong or something milky hardens where it shouldn't. Holt arrives at scenes like weather. You feel him before you see him. Not now. Someone had peeled him away. Seraphine stepped. No, she allowed herself to be moved, so a passing pair of acolytes could brush between us with folded linen. Their heads were down in that perfect way people achieve when they've been told not to hear. Later, Seraphine said gently. Let the king settle the hall. The city will still need your eyes at dawn. My eyes went where they wanted anyway. The threshold breathed toward me. Jace shifted just enough to make it look like he'd done nothing at all and caught my glance the way you catch a thrown coin. Palm, close, pocket. He eased forward, bumping a pew with the back of his knee on purpose. A scuff. A sorry. A distraction with manners. Apologies, he said to Seraphine with beta grace. My father asked that I fetch the night attendants for the staff. May I? Of course, she said, kindness unbroken. Third drawer of the sacristy cabinet. The third drawer is never attendants. It's old seals, we all knew it. She smiled anyway. While she watched Jace, I took one step closer to the door and breathed shallow. The sweet metal note crept colder. Not lamp oil, not polish. Asterium smoke thins into something like snowy glass when it's fresh. This was the tail end, the aftersigh of resin touched to a low flame. My tongue went numb along the sides. Sight isn't sight. It's the body saying listen in ways you can't translate for anyone else. The hair at my forearms lifted. May I pray? I asked, because words are levers, and this one would move her hand away from the handle without her noticing. Always, she said, and stepped back half a pace, palms open, making a corridor of courtesy toward the altar instead of the cupboard. I didn't take it. I sank to the front pew and bowed my head because kneeling tricks rooms into relaxing. With my eyes down, the chapel was a map of feet and thresholds. A shadow crossed the crack under the side room door. Slow, then gone. Aldrich's voice is easy to hear even when he isn't speaking. The keep tilts toward it. He wasn't here, by design or by someone else's request. Good. That made this a narrow question, not a clang of swords. Jace, I said without saying it, just a breath shaped like his name. He didn't turn. He moved a paper he didn't need, looked at a drawer that didn't matter, and cleared his throat in a way that would draw a novice's eyes an inch to the left. The door latch whispered. Not open, settling, the way latches do when someone inside puts a palm against them to feel what the outside feels like. Seraphine's shawl edged my shoulder. What does the ledger say? She asked, soft, as if we were two women by a kitchen window and not playing knives with our words. About vows and wine and fear. It says fear leaks into everything, I said. Helpful people, too. We must not let fear write the story, she murmured. We should not let fear hold the pen, I corrected. A soft metallic tick, like a small tool touching a lip, tapped once from behind the door. A faint thread of smoke slipped out under the jamb, then thinned, then went shy. There's a line between incense and what that thinness was. I felt it skate my teeth. I stood. Seraphine's hand, lifted in the politest stop a person can make without making a stop. Child. Every cup poured in the hall would have been witnessed by the mirror, I said. But not every cask lifted to the tap was. I put 2 fingers on the door not to open it, just to feel the temperature of the iron. Cool. Fresh air meets recent work and the metal's skin tells you a story. If I am wrong, the ledgers will apologize to your cupboards tomorrow. You do not need to be in there, she said, and all the warmth never left her voice even as the words pressed like a thumb. You need rest. I need to count where the numbers hide, I said. Footsteps saved us both from proving which pressure would win. Holt came quick down the side aisle, keys biting his palm, breath controlled. Only the old stone heard the hurry. Majesty's orders, he said, nodding to me first because tonight has rules now. Cellar seals intact. We're to inventory the chapel stores before we move any cart again. Seraphine's lashes lowered. You doubt our keeping. We doubt the night, Holt said, and the answer was so perfectly shaped it could have been hung above the door. She could have argued, she didn't. She pivoted smooth as liturgy. "Then let us count," she said. "I would never keep you from comfort." Holt slid the key into the lock. The key should not have fit. It did, because keys tell you what rooms think of you. The door gave with a little breath, and the scent came round our ankles like a cat. Linen, brass polish, candle ends stacked neat, and under it that not scent, that thin, cold glide. Jace slipped sideways to block anyone else's view. I stepped in first. The room was tidy enough to make a noble smile. Numbers hate perfect closets. They always hide something under exactness. My fingers trailed the shelf edges without touching anything useful. The chalice brims sat staunched with cloth circles. The oil vials were corked and labeled. A wooden bead roll lay where hands had remembered to put it back. A brass dish had a thumbprint in dried paste along its rim. The color wasn't wax. The shape wasn't careless. Someone had wiped at it with the pad of a finger, fast, then gotten called away. "What do you see?" Holt asked, voice at a low thread that didn't carry to the doorway. "Not what I need," I said, which is as good as seeing. I crouched. The baseboard carried a faint gray kiss, straight as a ruler line, resin dust wiped and missed by a hair. The wind beneath the sill lifted a curl of it and let it fall again. My tongue numbed along the sides. Seraphine stood in the threshold, light massed around her in a way that made most people feel gentled simply because light likes to be near her. "Well," she asked, like a mother asks how much flour the cake needs. "We need clean air," I said, "and time, and for no hands to touch anything that smells like patience." Jace coughed a not cough and turned his head. Holt nodded and lifted a hand. Staff outside shifted the chapel's breath with practiced obedience. Windows, vents, a draft coaxed where a draft would behave. We were still moving the air when the messenger reached us at a run. He tried to make sound like walking. He stopped at the pew end, hand on the wood to keep from panting, and looked to Holt first, then to me because tonight has rules. "From Night Gate," he said. "Envoy at the portico, requests audience at once." "Who?" Holt asked. The messenger swallowed, eyes flicking to the chapel door and back. "Nocturne Court," he said. "Their seal." He held up the wax. Silver black, stamped deep with a crescent chained at one end. "Name," I said. "Valerian," he answered, the word landing in the room like a door opening onto cold air. By his own voice. The name landed like cold air. Holt nodded once and we moved. Rain whispered on the portico tiles. Lanterns threw long bars across wet stone. At the bottom of the steps, the envoy stood with 2 attendants and a single chest no bigger than a hymn book. Cloaks were plain, blades peace-bound, posture unruffled. "Valerian," the envoy said, by his own voice, and bowed just deep enough to respect without surrendering weight. He had the traveler's stillness that comes from choosing each motion on purpose. Eyes that count a room and leave nothing dropped on the floor. Holt handled courtesies. I watched the chest, not for size, for patience. Patience pools around objects that have been prepared to change a night. "Your message?" Holt asked. "Not a quarrel," Valerian said. Rain freckled his gloves. "A correction before a quarrel becomes fashionable. We request witness under your mirror." We could have taken him to a side chamber and wasted an hour being delicate. Aldrich doesn't waste hours. The hall was still warm from ceremony by the time we crossed the threshold. Guards reset the perimeter. Lysa's mouth shaped a word I didn't need to hear to know it was short and sharp. The dowager's cane set down like a comma. Seraphine arrived on a current of concerned air with 2 quiet acolytes who looked like punctuation marks. Valerian inclined his head to the dais, the exact measure again. "We have troubles at the docks," he said, for the room, not for me. "Our patrols show illusions near your south beacons. Rumor says we set them. We did not." "Rumor tires me," Aldrich said. "Bring your truth to the glass." The chest opened with a whisper of well-oiled hinges. Inside lay a single scroll case and a sealed vial tucked in felt. Valerian lifted the case first. "Ledger extracts," he said. "Times, tides, roots. We brought what our mirror will permit beyond our walls." The Oathglass does not like lies. It does like receipts. He handed the case to a guard with calm, but it was the vial that drew the room like a candle draws moths. Dark, steady, the stopper strapped in a way that made you want to trust the strap, because you knew your own hands couldn't tie it that neatly. Sample from a net near your chapel outlet, Valerian said. Smelled wrong, burned wrong. Our chemists say the smoke tastes like cold glass. Asterium wears perfume and manners in the city. At sea it doesn't bother. Place it, Aldrich said. Valerian set the vial on the offering table under the Oathglass and stepped back, palms visible, attention precise. He watched the angles of bodies in the room the way I watch numbers. Witness, the herald called, smaller voice than at oath time, but the same bones. The mirror hazed pale, then quieted. Ledger pages were unrolled, stamps aligned. Holt's fingers did their tidy dance. Cormac weighed the seals without being seen to weigh them. Jace's stance put his shoulder where it should be if anyone forgot how knives act at parties. The room needed air, and someone said the word that rooms choose when they need a place to rest their hands. Toast. Not the casks, I said, soft and even, and Holt was already shaking his head. The sealed cart sat in a shadow with 2 Omegas flanking, wax unbroken. We have the king's private decanter, an attendant offered, lifting a cut crystal thing from the sideboard. It had been locked behind wood and a small pride. I knew that lock. I knew who kept the key, not the chapel. The dowager tipped 2 fingers. Pour. Valerian's gaze slid to the decanter, not hungry, not nervous, just taking the measure of a risk he hadn't asked us to take. He lifted a hand the width of a breath. If I may observe, he said, with that exact courtesy that could pry a room open without anyone noticing their grip relax. Our court will not drink without your court's blessing. We are guests. Then witness, Aldrich said. That will do. The attendant drew the stopper with a small sigh. The first cup found light and became ceremony. The Oathglass does not care about cups, but rooms do, and the mirror tolerates our small glitter if we do not ask it to tolerate lies along with it. My wrist cooled. Not much. The way meltwater grazes skin when your focus is elsewhere. A pressure gathered behind my teeth, metallic and thin. I set my breath lower and listened to the puzzle of motion. Hands, pour, tray slide, rail, the small shift of weight when someone decides they will watch a thing all the way through to the end. Aldrich took the first cup. The dowager received hers. Valerian did not reach for any. He left a small space where taking would have been untrue. Jace's hand hovered near the rail, casual. Seraphine's shawl moved in a wind that wasn't there. The mirror light ran pale over crystal. The wine looked honest. The air did not. I stepped a small angle into Aldrich's sightline, not to block, just to let him see my mouth shape a single word. Wait. He lifted the cup anyway because kings cannot be seen to obey breaths. His wrist turned. The rim nicked light. My tongue went numb along the sides. I hit the cup. Not hard. Enough. Liquid flared, a dark arc against pale. The hall made that sound people make when the wrong thing happens in the middle of a tradition they thought would end like always. The wine hit the Oathglass's light, and the world told the truth too quickly for most eyes to learn it. A frost-fine lattice raced across the spill, there and gone, threading itself in a pattern I knew from resin burned in tunnels and casks and cupboards. Not random, not natural. A stitch designed to write a story inside a room. Steel rasped somewhere because men remember training even when manners scream. Jace's shoulder was just enough in front of mine to make me want to push it back into the place where it would keep him more alive. Holt said nothing and moved 3 steps that meant 6 orders. The dowager did not blink. Valerian didn't move at all. What are you doing? Someone whispered in a voice aimed at outrage, not answer. Preventing a mistake, I said. The words left like coins put exactly where they belong. I turned my hand so the Oathglass washed the puddle again. Lines shimmered, a sigil flashed and vanished. The room saw something. It didn't know what. Explain, Aldrich said, very quiet. Slow poison, I said. Resin that burns cold. It likes ceremony, it likes mirrors. I let the next breath sit. And it likes to be seen as someone else's idea. It is your own decanter, Seraphine said, and the kindness in her tone held the kind of grief that makes rooms want to be patient with you. Child, you must not make a panic where courtesy should live. I am not panicking, I said. I am counting. Valerian's attention never left the puddle. He stood with his hands open and empty, the way people who have been lied about stand when they intend to survive it without flinching. May I? He asked. Aldrich's nod was the width of a thought. Valerian knelt, keeping his sleeves clear of spill, and turned his head slightly so the mirror caught the angle of liquid the way a draftsman lays a page under a straight edge. He did not reach. He looked. The lines obliged him. They ran in that same clever geometry again, arcs stitched to suggest a crest, a curl, a hunger. The room inhaled, a single large organism remembering tales it likes to tell about strangers with sharp teeth. I tasted resin, not blood, not vintage. The pattern snapped a second time, and that's when the mirror added its cruelty. The lines settled into a form our court knew, a nocturne crest simplified for people who prefer stories to algebra. The crowd made the small, ugly sound people make when they are pleased to have been told exactly who to blame. That, someone said, is their mark. It is a mark, I said. It is the wrong kind of true. Aldrich didn't look away from the glass. How wrong? The lines are too clean, I said, and let the habit of my gift speak because it knows how. Real sigils breathe, they warp at the edges where vows and yous and hands touch them. This one is the same every time it flickers. No fatigue, no fingerprint, no weight. It's stitched to perform. Valerian did not defend himself. It's a difficult thing to watch. A man decide to hold still while a room decides if it will hate him. He glanced up at the mirror like he trusted a machine more than a crowd. I recognized the look. May I offer a question to the glass? He asked, still kneeling, not asking permission of the wrong people. He aimed the words to the dais where they must go. Aldrich's palm kissed the rail once. Ask. Valerian spoke carefully, not to the hall, not to the mirror, the way you ask a lock to be the shape you need. Has this liquid touched nocturne hands since it left the king's sideboard? The mirror did nothing at all. No line, no crack, not even a polite shiver. Has this pattern been made by nocturne vow? The quiet held. The pattern flickered and went shy. Holt's breath left his nose like relief with manners. Seraphine's shawl trembled and then remembered itself. I went to the decanter. I did not touch. The stopper's rim had a faint, dull ring where crystal should be clean. The ring had a seam. Someone had pressed a thin collar into the mouth and sanded it neat. The kind of collar you could paint with resin, so thin it wouldn't kiss the air until light told it to speak. Your Majesty, I said, may I ask mine? Aldrich's eyes cut to me. The answer was already in them. Ask. Has any hand not sworn to this household changed the decanter since it was locked? The mirror traced a pale hair and let it fade. Clean. Has any hand sworn to this household changed it? A thin white filament snapped across the rail like a spider deciding where to make home. Not a break, a breath. The kind of almost signal you get when truth tries to hide inside obedience. My tongue went cold. That is what obedience tastes like when someone wears it to cover work. Who opened the sideboard? Aldrich asked, not loud. Under steward, Holt said, before anyone else could step into a mistake. Key from my ring, I watched it. No one touched the decanter before I turned my back to bring the tray. Who polished the glass this afternoon? I asked, smaller. Not the decanter, the lock. Holt didn't answer, which told me he was counting too. Jace lifted his chin the smallest degree toward the cloister door. I didn't look. I didn't need to. The air from that corridor had carried asterium all night. It seems, Seraphine murmured, we are all very tired. I am not, I said, and my voice came out cleaner than I expected. I am awake. The puddle tried its little theater again. The crest ghosted and faded. I slid my hand into the light, not to touch the wine, to cast a shadow. The pattern tried to form and failed. Resin wants audience. It wants contrast. It wants to be seen as the thing the room already fears. Enough, Aldrich said, not to me, to the room, to the part of it that was glad to be given a villain it knew how to pronounce. His cup lay on its side where I had put it. He did not pick it up. Seal the sideboard. Holt, your ring. Done, Holt said. Valerian rose, fluid and without drama. He looked at no one who wanted to be seen looking at him. We brought a mirror of our own, he said, low to me and the rail. Not to argue, to resonate. Later, Aldrich said, and his tone put a pin in the night where he wanted to return. Later, Valerian agreed, with an evenness I envied. The herald found his breath again, and the room remembered it had chests to close and floors to mop and pride to collect. 2 guards carried in a sand bucket for the spill. Jace's hand left the hilt it wasn't going to need. Seraphine's acolytes folded their worry into tidy corners. I stood under the Oathglass and watched the wine dry in a shape that wanted to be a story and couldn't quite hold it without light. The hall thought the danger had passed. The mirror did not. As the sand sifted, the pale veins in the Oathglass lifted, soft, then sharper, and for a blink the surface wrote a sign no human mouth had spoken, a nocturne sigil traced in frost over the face of the mirror itself. Gasps, then a hush that tasted like bloodless thunder. Only I could feel what was wrong with it, the cadence off by a hair, the geometry too perfect to have lived on anyone's skin. A forgery, pretty, hungry, a lie dressed as a guest. The Oathglass threw a vampire sigil that shouldn't exist, stitched wrong, 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 and every eye in Ironville was already believing it. The Oathglass held the pretty lie like frost on a window. I felt the wrongness first, the geometry too perfect, then the room felt it second, the way air tightens before rain. Move, Aldrich said, quiet as a blade put away, not drawn. Orders slid through the hall. Holt sealed the sideboard. Lysa broke the crowd into corridors with 2 fingers and a look. Jace fell in beside me as we crossed the threshold. Valerian's envoy dipped his head, unreadable, as the doors shut and the castle's noise turned to rain again. We took the east stairs and the night let us out. Courtyard lamps fell in bars across wet stone. The motorcade waited under the arch, black, low, windows smoked. Aldrich took the front car. I slid in after him, Jace closing the door on my side with a soft thump that sounded like a promise keeping itself. The city unspooled below Ironville in cold neon. Nightport signs flickered brave colors onto puddles. The ferries moved like quiet thoughts across the dark water. We ran south along the ridge, then down. Switchbacks, warehouses, the smell of salt and diesel, old ropes drying from other storms. Aldrich watched the streets like a man reading a ledger with names he already knows. We break the lie where it's born, he said. Docks, beacons, chapel outlet. Resin likes vents and stories, I said. It doesn't like clean air or questions. Good, he said. We brought both. Our convoy slid into the Cade cartel yard. Low buildings, kept clean, casino neon humming 2 blocks over like a second tide. The yard boss jogged to meet us, rain spitting at his collar. Holt took the first report. Aldrich took the second with his eyes. I took the book. The office was a square with a window and a habit. Coded ledgers lived on a shelf you wouldn't pick unless you didn't trust yourself. I opened the one that smelled most like thumbs. Numbers lined up too neat. Skims breathe a certain way. These didn't breathe, they posed. Someone copied good work, I said. Badly. Jace leaned over my shoulder, close enough that I felt the heat of him like the memory of a fireplace. His breath stayed even. What line? Dock fees, ferry tips, salt requisitions. I tapped the thin strokes. All identical day after day, real night's wobble. Aldrich's hand fell once on the desk, a small thunder. Pull the beacon logs, he said to the yard boss. I want who lit, who cleaned, who brought oil. We crossed the yard toward the beacons. Iron cages bolted high on poles to throw light down the quay. Rain stung my cheeks. The wind shifted, and a breath of something too sweet slid under the diesel. Asterium wears perfume even in a storm. Up, Jace said, and was already on the ladder. He moved with the ease of someone who believes he'll catch himself. I caught the rung after him and climbed. At the platform, the beacon belly was warm when it should have cooled. Soot smudged the rim in a neat crescent, not the honest mess of a busy night. In the seam where the hood joined the housing, a pale film had dried to a shine only a ledger eye would love. "Collar," I murmured, thin, glued. Jace's gloved thumb hovered a hair away. "Trip for light," he said. "It wants the mirror." "It wants a story," I said. "The mirror's the biggest one in town." Aldrich stood below, looking up into rain like he could see the trick without climbing. "Pull it," he called. "Careful." Jace slid a small flat from his belt, eased the seam, and lifted the collar free. It came off clean, too clean, a loop as light as a lie. He held it up, rain beaded, and ran away in neat lines. "Bag," I said. He handed it down to Holt. We locked the beacon hood. I turned to climb. The yard went wrong. Not loud, a shiver under noise. The kind of shift you feel in your teeth before your eyes remember what they're for. A dozen men moved at once at the gate in a pattern that said we belong here to anyone who didn't keep books for a living. Jace didn't wait for orders. He was already moving, down the ladder and into the yard like his feet knew the ending and still chose the middle. I followed. They wore dock coats and the small halo pins we'd seen in the tunnel, filed base, just a hair. Holy in the way you wear holiness when you want witnesses. They didn't run. They approached, palms visible, backs easy. The lilt of a song drifted from the casino 2 streets away. "Gentlemen," Holt said. "Evening," the tallest answered, smile soft and wrong. "Heard the king could use hands." "Hands report at the gate office," Holt said. He nodded, the way a man nods to courtesy he means to break. "We brought a gift," he said, and the men behind him reached under their coats in the same second like a rehearsal you wished you missed. "Down," Jace said, already in front of me. The first throw wasn't a knife. It was a handful of salt, cheap, coarse, blinding in rain. Men forget what salt can be when they've never had to cook for wolves. It hit the ground in a glittering fan. The second throw was a bottle whose contents hissed when rain kissed the spill and threw a breath of cold sweet up into my mouth. Asterium burned thin. We moved, not chaos training recycled into tonight. Guards closed angles. Holt's shout turned to hand signals. The yard boss kicked a crate into a barrier that made the world smaller in a smart way. I kept my eyes up. The men with pins broke 2 directions, one toward the beacon base, one toward the warehouse door where ledgers sleep. A coat brushed my shoulder. The man behind it lifted something bright. I saw the arc, not the blade. Jace's body hit mine sideways and the bright thing hit him instead of me. A breath. A quiet. Warmth slid under my hand where it landed on his ribs. "Sorry," he said, like the word could be a joke, and turned so the next swing cut nothing but air. I don't like violence, I like angles. I took the angle I had. The warehouse has a switch box the size of a small confession. I hit the yard floodlights. Yellow-white poured down and flattened the night. Illusions hate honest light. Men who rely on audiences hate it more. The pins looked tawdry in the glow. The coins they wore at their belts had the same filed mark, cheap filing, rushed. The men were not dock crew. Their boots were too new, their grips wrong, fingers stiff around tools they didn't know how to respect. Aldrich moved through them like a solution, not a roar, a rearrangement. He never wasted a step. 2 men forgot their plans. A third remembered he was mortal and sat down hard just from the look. One of them came for me anyway, calculating that the smallest person in the yard meant the easiest end. He didn't account for the fact that I've hauled barrels and books up more stairs than his mother's scoldings ever counted. When he reached, I gave him the ledger edge and the wrist he liked least, and he dropped the tool with a sound that told me it would bruise later. "Pick it up," I said, because manners matter. He didn't. "Rhea," Jace called. And I turned and saw the red at his shirt, where the blade had kissed, and then slid. Not deep, not clean. A line that would sting in the morning and make some part of me think of the shape of his shoulder for more hours than I should admit. We took them fast once the light told the truth. Holt's crew bound hands with cord from the tarp lines. The men still smiled, poor things, like their instructions had included look harmless if caught. Aldrich said nothing for a long breath. He doesn't waste questions. When he finally spoke, his voice went nowhere but where it needed to. "Who sent you?" he asked the tallest. "Don't use other people's names to make yours heavy." The man shut his mouth around a lie and tasted it. I could see the wince behind his eyes. He looked at the pin at his collar like it might answer for him. Holt bent, casual, and brushed the left cuff of the man's coat with his thumb. Resin dust kissed the fabric. He showed me the glimmer on his skin. Asterium leaves a ghost even when you're careful. "Warehouse door," I said. "The varnish will have it." We walked the line to the hinge, and I laid my palm near the jamb without touching. Cold lifted from a strip the width of a fingernail. Straight, careful, recent. The lock had been loved too much by hands that wanted it to forget what it was for. "Inside," Aldrich said, and the yard boss handed him the code. We stepped into the aisle between crates. The air was honest here, salt, wood, rope, and under it, the thin sweet of a story so patient it had convinced itself it was truth. I opened the ledger that never gets checked because it's for show. Receipts sat in tidy stacks, ink still shy. Between 2 pages, tucked like a prayer left under a plate, lay a string of small beads the color of old frost. Not glass, not bone. Asterium turned into devotion. I didn't touch it. I called Jace with a look. He came, breath even, shirt damp at the side. He's learned how to move without telling a wound he remembers it. "Let me," he said, "because sometimes you let the person with the blood on his shirt be the one who opens the next part of the night." He slid the beads out with 2 fingers, and then palmed them the way you palm a coin you mean to make disappear for a child and reappear behind their ear. "Rosary," he said, soft. The stamped charm at the end caught the floodlight and answered with a cut of silver. A halo with a crossbar, clean, not filed. The chapel mark as it is supposed to be, not the cheap edition. "Hidden where donations go," I said. "Made of what the chapel says it doesn't touch." Behind us, the yard sighed as men settled into the part of violence where they count, not swing. The floodlights buzzed. The casino song 2 blocks away pivoted into a new key like the city had decided to pretend it had always meant to be happy. Jace opened his hand so I could see the charm and the beads nested there. Rain freckled his knuckles. A line of red slipped from his palm to his wrist and stuttered at the cuff. "Sorry," he said again, but he wasn't talking about the cut. I looked at the beads, then at his face, then back at the mark. The clean, stamped chapel sigil sitting on a chain made from the same cold resin we'd chased all night. "Don't be," I said. "You caught the story before it finished writing itself." He closed his fingers. The beads pressed into skin and left a faint pale ring like frost under firelight. In Jace's bloodied palm lay a hidden Asterium rosary, the chapel's sigil stamped clear at the end, and it burned cold. The beads sat in Jace's palm like frost that had learned how to pray. We bagged the rosary. Holt sealed the ledgers. Aldrich gave the knight 3 orders that rearranged the docks without raising his voice, and the convoy took us back up the ridge. Rain made a soft drum of the car roof. The city lights smeared into long colors and then snapped back into stone and iron as Ironville rose over us again. Inside the gate, bells moved the air, chapel bells, not alarm. Even gentle notes can hurt a crowd. We hadn't cleared the portico when Seraphine met us in the cloister. Concern fitted perfectly to the shape of a careful room. "Whispers are running faster than your wheels," she said, shawl gathered at her elbows. "For the sake of peace, let us quiet them." Her eyes found mine the way a hand finds a pulse. A simple purity rite, brief, clean, seen. Aldrich's gaze cut to the hall doors where nobles already drifted like leaves that refused to blow away. The dowager stood at the edge of their wake, cane quiet, patience narrowed to the width of a blade. Lysa lifted a brow that meant contain it or crown it. "Do it here," Aldrich said, "under eyes, not behind them." We moved, not toward the oath hall, toward the chapel. Candles steadied the shadows. An acolyte set out a silver basin. Another lit a thurible, smoke curled, orange peel and sweet wax at the top, and under it the thin cold thread I had begun to taste everywhere resin liked to hide. The small purity glass, A handspan mirror in a silver frame was fixed above the basin so it would catch the face of anyone who bowed. "Short words," Aldrich said, taking the place beside the nave that lets a king approve without begging anyone's permission. Seraphine inclined her head. "Short as mercy." She gestured me forward with an open palm that would have looked like kindness to anyone whose teeth hadn't gone numb in the last hour. "Child, breathe. Stand where the light blesses you. No theatrics, only comfort." The thurible whispered. Acolytes fanned the smoke away from the crowd and toward the basin with that busy gentleness people mistake for innocence. Jace came to my right shoulder and forgot to hide that he had. Holt stayed within reach of the door. He listens to a room the way a vault listens to footsteps. "Questions first," I said, "then comfort." Seraphine's smile did not move. "If you insist." "I do." I lifted my voice just enough to carry. "Has any hand other than chapel hands prepared this rite?" "Yes," Seraphine said smoothly, before the mirror could take the question for its own. "The market sold our oil." "That is not what I asked," I said. She let the correction sit. "Only chapel hands," she said to the glass. The purity mirror curved a pale single line and let it rest there, truth enough. I pointed, not touching, to the rim of the basin. A faint dull sheen hugged the silver where a cloth might have lingered too long. "When was it polished?" "Tonight," she answered. "With what?" "Linseed and chalk." She didn't blink. "We are not clumsy." The thurible breathed again. The sweet metal note skimmed my teeth. Aldrich tipped his chin a fraction. "Proceed." I stepped into the light. The basin held nothing yet, only the room. The little mirror caught my face, and beyond it, the chapel's candles standing like a quiet choir. "Moon water," Seraphine said to the acolyte with the ewer. He poured. The surface trembled. The glass above it woke with the slightest brightening as face and water made their simple pact. "Repeat," Seraphine said, and gave me words that fit comfortably in most mouths. "My bones are winter, my breath is clean. I keep night where night belongs." I did not say them. Words are locks. Once you learn that, you stop putting your wrists in every bracelet someone offers. "I will make my own," I said steady. "Smallest truth, largest lie falls." A ripple moved along the benches. Jace's shoulder angled, casual as a doorway. "Begin," Aldrich said. I lifted my chin and let my voice be only as loud as it needed. "I will not be made into a blade for petty hands," I said, same promise I had made at the Oathglass. "I will count where numbers hide. I will not drink fear." The purity glass breathed. A thin sigil laid itself across its heart. Clean. Acolytes relaxed down their spines, trained, yes, but human. "Now the blessing," Seraphine said, a velvet edge inside the softness. "Hand to brow." I let her touch me, the lightest brush of oil. Cool tugged in the wake of her fingers like water from stone. She nodded to the acolyte with the ewer. He raised it again. And the thurible smoke thickened with a little hiss that doesn't belong to wax. The acolyte to Seraphine's left turned the chain on the censer as if to settle it. His ring flashed. A hair's breadth packet tucked behind the hinge gave up the last of something pale into the charcoal. The smell sharpened, not incense. Asterium kissed to ember. I kept my eyes on the water as the first veil of smoke slid over it. My tongue went numb. The mirror brightened. A line of frost wrote itself across my reflection's brow, first thin, then branching, pretty as winter glass. A whispering pleasure ran through the pews, a room enjoying its own sense of certainty. "Stop," Jace's voice quiet. His hand rose from his side, not quite a reach. Seraphine's shawl sighed. "Do not be afraid," she said to the room. "Fear is a poor priest." I held still. When people want a scene, stillness is how you starve them. "Lift your eyes," she murmured. I did. The mark lay over my reflection like a neat crown of thorns, all geometry, no fatigue. At the bottom edge, where a real sigil would smudge with breath, the lines stayed perfect. "There," someone breathed, almost satisfied. "Name it," Seraphine said softly, and she did not speak to me, she spoke to the crowd. "Tainted by night, we will be gentle." Aldrich didn't move. The room learned silence from him. "This glass reads smoke," I said, "not bone." "Smoke reveals what bone denies," Seraphine answered, so gentle you could sleep in it. "Sometimes smoke just follows the hinge," I said. I looked down. The water trembled as if a bow had been drawn across it. A tiny, pale flake, smaller than a seed, floated near the rim, then kissed metal and vanished in a blink, not melted, reacted. "Hold the sensor," I said, voice to the acolyte, eyes still on the surface. He stopped the swing. The smoke thinned. The mark did not fade. It held its perfect angles like a signature stamped by a machine. "Enough," someone near the back said with relief disguised as outrage. "She's marked." Holt took one step forward. Lysa too. Jace's breath came shorter and then learned patience again. Aldrich's fingers flexed once against his palm and stilled. Seraphine folded her hands. "This is not a punishment," she said for the notes. "The rite only clarifies we will be kind." The mark waited, beautiful and wrong. "Your Majesty," I said, not turning my head, "may I ask one narrow question here, before that beauty becomes a weapon?" Aldrich's answer was a single syllable. "Ask." "To the glass," I said, and I chose my words like a locksmith chooses blanks. "Has Nocturne vow set this mark?" Nothing, not even a polite shiver. "Has Nocturne hand set it?" Silence, clean as bone. Seraphine's mouth held its soft line. "Rituals are larger than single hands." "Has this mark been set by vow at all?" The mirror gave a hairline twitch, so quick a room would miss it unless it had learned how quickly a hairline can turn into a winter. Not yes, not no, a glitch. I didn't smile. My tongue still tasted metal. "Then we are done," I said, and stepped back from the basin because stepping back is the only way to take power from a stage. A murmur rose, indignant, relieved, hungry. You can hear the difference if you live your life listening to coins and air. 2 guards at the nave entrance shifted their weight the way men do when they're ready to carry trouble if someone points to where it lives. Seraphine lifted a hand that looked like calm. "Your Majesty," she said, as if she were placing something gentle in his care, "for the peace of your people, let the child rest outside the halls until dawn. It is a mercy to spare her the hall's attention." Aldrich did not look at the mark. He looked at me the way a man looks at a cliff he intends to climb because he said he would, not because anyone promised him a view. "No," he said. The word went through the chapel like a bell rung once. "She is mine to keep," he said, and it was not possessive. It was stewardship. He stepped off the rail as if there were no distance between dais and floor and came to me, the room folding its fuss away from his path. "Walk," he said, low offer, not order. The smoke had put a small ache behind my eyes. I breathed shallow. My knees didn't argue, but they were preparing a complaint for morning. He saw the wobble I was trying not to give him. He didn't ask permission to refuse it. He slid an arm under my knees and another behind my back and lifted me, easy as carrying a book he decided to take with him, not abandon to damp. Gasps, shifts, a scrape of a chair leg from someone who had forgotten how to be furniture. The purity glass, denied its audience, kept its tidy little crown in my reflection as if to prove a point. I let it. We crossed the nave. Jace took my ledger and fell in at my shoulder without making it a picture. Holt opened the door with a ring of keys that didn't need to jingle to say whose night this was. In the corridor, the world remembered other smells. Stone, rain, bread cooling somewhere too far to help. The air felt honest again. The dowager waited at the hall turn, cane planted, face unreadable enough to make the tide hesitate. She didn't look at the mark. She looked at the way Aldrich's arms made a sentence out of my weight, and then at the chapel door where smoke still breathed like a lie refusing to lie down. "Put her down," she said, not unkind. "Then listen." He did, careful, a clean return of borrowed weight. Jace passed me the ledger as if it were better medicine than anything in the infirmary. The dowager's eyes were winter sky. "The city walks an edge," she said. "If you keep her in sight, the accords will break out there." Her cane tilted toward the windows, the docks, the dark. "If you send her away, they might only break in here." Aldrich didn't answer. "Choose a door," she said, steady as a measured pour. "Send the girl away or war." "Neither," he said. "We keep her and the Accords. She verifies the Nocturne side tonight." The hall shifted. Orders moved before objections could find breath. Valerian waited where the doors had left him, rain threading his shoulders. "Agreed." Aldrich said it for the room, not for the envoy. Under their glass, not ours tonight. Rumor lost a foothold. We went out into the wet. The motorcade took the ridge north and then east, where iron spans the sea. The sky bridge began glass and steel, silver lattice over dark water. Lanterns burned blue-white, tide-shouldered pylons. Below, lightning stitched itself sideways along the skin of the waves, silent and private. At the far end, the arcade opened. Thin pillars, dark wood, balconies glazed like still water. Musicians threaded quiet strings. The air was cool, set to flatter. Aldrich walked with me far enough to mark the bargain. "Ask for the smallest truth," he murmured. "We'll carry the largest." He stepped to the edge where kings are seen and see. Valerian gestured to the side table of rights, water, salt, ink, and lifted nothing. "Your questions," he said. "Our glass." Their mirror hung lower than ours, oval, silvered dark, framed in tidal carving, a night lake waiting to be named. He drew a narrow case from his sleeve, opened it to a folded veil as light as breath, silver thread a faint seam. "Veil ward, it dulls harvest lines, not eyes. No claim, wear it if you like." I set it along my hairline. Air moved easier, the metallic taste eased out of my teeth. At the doorway, he held the threshold like a hinge, close enough to reach me, far enough to respect a treaty. Holt counted exits without noise. "Begin," Aldrich said, voice carrying without rise. I faced the dark glass. Has any Nocturne vow written the crest under Ironvale's glass? The surface softened like wind on a lake, then cleared. Nothing. Has any Nocturne hand carried resin into our halls? Clean stillness. Has any accord-bound soul of your court sworn to forge our mirror? The mirror stayed calm, uncracked and sure. The musicians held their patient line. Valerian stood just outside my sightline, hands open, sleeves still, restraint that reads as trust when rooms are searching for anger. I lifted the dock vial without letting it touch their mirror. "This touched your outlet. It wasn't poured by your hands." "No," he said. "We found it before rumor did." "Has this compound been blessed in any rite you would recognize?" A faint line, then gone. "No." "Made where wolves keep ledgers?" "No." "Where wolves bless rooms?" Light acknowledged kitchens and cupboards, not altars, not labs with law. That was enough for the hall. Attendants eased trays, sugared quince, pale wine, spotless water. No toasts, only glasses lifted to throat level and lowered again. Valerian's gaze tipped toward the arch that opens to the bridge. "Walk." Wind braided the music thin out on the glass span. The sea threw a fresher scent than any cloister. The veil tickled at my cheek. The last of the chapel's smoke left my head. "Thank you," I said, "for the loan." "You may return it when the city is less ambitious," he said. "Or never, it doesn't mind honest work." We stood without facing each other. Far below, lightning stitched another silent seam. Ironvale's cliff cut black to the west. Somewhere behind us, a laugh failed and turned to quiet. "He trusts you," he said. "He trusts the job." I've watched him long enough to know he knows the difference. He let the compliment die of natural causes. "Your glass answered clean. Ours tried to please a crowd." "Ours prefers small rooms," he said. "So do I." From here the locked beacons were lines of steady fire. Between them, darker slips where rumor likes to swim. "You'll take pressure for the crest trick," I said. "Yes." "You aren't going to fight it." "No, you are." Wind pressed the veil like a brief, cool hand. "Some of my own will help the rumors. Some of mine will enjoy that. Some of both of us will pretend not to." We let the bridge hum, glass underfoot, pylons breathing tide. Restraint settled deeper, the kind that keeps people alive. "Say the thing you came to say," I told him. He didn't move closer. His voice did. Your chapel drinks from wolves. The bridge kept the secret and carried the echo back to the hall. 3 robed figures stepped from the gallery shadows, silver bowls cupped in both palms. Child, one breathed, smoke-sweet. A purity escort to your rooms, only a moment, only comfort. Wind pushed at the balcony flags. I kept the veil ward at my hairline. I don't need escort, I said. I need clean air. Jace's shoulder edged into my line. Holt's footfalls went quiet behind. Aldrich's attention placed itself without drawing a sword. I said no, I told the smoke. Air is what we offer, another murmured, tipping her bowl so a curl of incense reached for my cheek. Orange peel and wax rode the top. Under it there, the thin, cold thread like a fingernail drawn over glass. Stop, Holt said, tone mild enough to pass as etiquette. The king gave no order for rites. The front acolyte's lashes dropped. We ask no orders, we ask mercy. 2 steps more and we were under the open arch. The balcony spread a slick strip of stone above the garden, a low wall, a long drop, a breeze that tried to be kind and couldn't. The left robe drifted level with my flank. The second let her bowl tilt further. The smoke woke as if a match had been struck where none had. Not incense. Asterium stung thin behind the sweetness. The nearest robe smiled, gentle, practiced, hands up. In that small gap where manners expect gratitude, she reached. A sleeve stiletto flashed low from her cuff. Jace was already there. He cut across me, forearm to forearm, taking the light on his shirt instead of my ribs. Metal kissed fabric. His hand closed on her wrist and turned it with the calm of a man making a bed. The blade clanged to stone, skittered, and kissed the wall. Rain lifted a red thread from his side and blurred it into the cloth. Warmth slid under my hand, where it landed on his ribs. Always. His voice cracked on the word. The balcony tightened. The third robe moved, no bowl at all, trying to push me back to the rail while smoke rode its quiet winter around our ankles. I dropped just enough to put stone under my palm and a knee into the space she needed. She hit it and lost patience. The bowl tipped. Sweet cold washed my tongue. Aldrich didn't touch her. He took the bowl from the air and set it down so fast and so gently it forgot to argue. The smoke ran sideways instead of up. His other hand found a sleeve edge and taught the body in it how to stop quickly without falling. Holt's keys didn't jingle. Rope appeared. The first robe's hands learned how to behave. The emptied bowl acolyte tried to look harmless. The pin at her collar flashed, the same halo with the filed crossbar we'd seen on the docks. Who sent you? Aldrich asked the air, not loud. Fear, the front robe said, and lowered her eyes when the word rang wrong. Guards were suddenly exactly where they should be. Jace steadied me instead of himself and hissed when he remembered he was wearing heat. Fine, he lied, breath even. Liar, I said, pressing cloth to slow the red with pressure that wouldn't bruise. Take them, Holt told the guards. No smoke, no spill, no preaching. Later, I said to Holt's look, I need to see where this breath learned its trick. We cleared the balcony. Wind and rain calmed the resin's temper. Jace walked like a person not bleeding, then leaned a shoulder to the wall for 1 second that counted as 3. You should see the healer, I said. In a minute, he said. Now. In a minute, he repeated, and made the minute mine. We moved fast along the outer walk to the tower stairs. The falconry roof is half covered, half sky, dry for wings and messages, and people who want a little weather with their privacy. Bells chimed on jesses. Clean straw shifted under boots. Feather and leather scented the air. Some other note had climbed the steps too, the faint echo of the balcony's trick. 2 pages glanced up from polishing hoods, saw my face and Jace's shirt, and wisely looked down again. A rack of cloaks hung near the stair, stable coats, messenger wraps, and one garment set apart on a higher peg. The travel cloak with the patterned hem that can brush both fancy rooms and salt air without apology. The hem wasn't the point, the floor beneath it was. At first it looked like any tower dust, pale, patient, forgettable. Then the lantern moved and every grain answered with a small, cold blink. Not sand, not lint. The glitter of resin ground so fine a careless breath could carry it. I didn't touch. I tore a thin strip from the corner of my ledger page and laid it along the floor where the dust thickened toward the wall. The paper drank a line of ash pale and left a shine like frost. My tongue numbed along the sides just looking at it. The cloak's inner seam told the better story. Someone had run a line of stitching along the facing and then unpicked it so neatly you'd swear it had never been. The thread left a ghost, perfect path for a collar or bead strip to ride the edge and shake itself loose where birds and wind would take the proof away. Jace stood without leaning now, one hand at his side, the other quiet on the peg. He didn't say any of the names in his head. He let the air say them. "Rooms are gentle," I said, soft enough the bells didn't hear. "When we let them be." "And when we do?" he asked. "They collect what falls out of our pockets." I slid the paper into a fold and tucked it behind a seam in my sleeve. Dust lifted like snow when a door opens and someone says a name they shouldn't. Down the stair, a step bowed but didn't creak. A shawl brush stoned the way only one shawl in this keep knows how. Calm, kind, careful. "Later," Jace said, already reading the same weather. "Yes," I said. We stepped back from the peg so the lantern's circle could return to ordinary. The bells settled. The pages didn't see us see what we'd seen. Under the lantern, frost-pale grains winked from the floor, asterium, mapped in a half-moon beneath the travel cloak's hem. Seraphine's hem. The lantern caught the frost-pale grains. A thin breath on my tongue went cold. "We have it," I said. Jace nodded once. He eased his weight off the peg like nothing in him was protesting. The step below bowed, quiet as a yes. A shawl brushed stone, calm, kind, careful. "Later," he breathed. We slipped out before the careful shawl became a conversation. Down the stair, past the bells, into the corridor where rain's smell fights old stone and never wins. Holt took the folded scrap from my sleeve with 2 fingers and tucked it into a pouch that already had a name in mind. A shadow detached from the arch. "Council Hall," Aldrich said. We moved. The council chamber holds a stillness the Oath Hall never bothers to learn. Maps, a long table, 2 iron braziers banking low. Beyond the inner arch, the Oathglass watched from its frame in the next room, close enough to hear, far enough to make us behave. "Sit," I told Jace and pushed him toward the bench. He didn't. He swayed once, then found the wall, then found steadiness like he could pull it from the mortar. "See the healer," I said. "In a minute." "Now." He touched my sleeve, brief, apologetic, and went. Holt ghosted after him, the pouch with the dust riding his palm like a secret that already knew how to testify. "Here," Aldrich said. He'd drawn the rail segment they use when they want the mirror to hear from the council floor. It's just wood and silver, a hand span high, but when you set your palm on it, the Oathglass pays more attention. "Lesson?" I asked. "Knives," he said. He tipped his head toward the arch. The mirror's veins lifted, listening. "Questions have a point, an edge, and a spine," he said, palm warm on the rail. "Point is the noun you can't wriggle. Edge is the verb you sharpen. Spine is the frame that makes the room stop performing." He tapped the rail once. "Never start with why. It feeds actors. Use has to lock time. Use this to lock object. Stack 2 clean truths to crush a pretty lie between them." He slid a chipped goblet across the table. It stopped under the arch's spill of pale. "Try," he said. I set my hand on the rail. Has any hand not sworn to this household touched this cup since it left the sideboard? The Oathglass breathed a faint line and let it fade. "Clean." "Edge sharper," he said. "Less air." "Has any hand not sworn to this household touched this cup tonight?" I said, closing the space between my words the way you close the space between blade and skin when you mean to shave, not bleed. "Nothing, which is good when nothing means safe." He pushed a halo pin into the light, the cheap filed kind. It gleamed, too pleased with itself. "Again." Has any hand sworn to the chapel filed this pin? A hairline stuttered and died. Not a lie, I said. A dodge, I left them a door. Close it. Has any hand sworn to the chapel, changed this pin since it left the sacristy? The glass gave me the smallest twitch of winter. Not a crack, a warning. My mouth went metallic for half a breath. Good, he said. Now put your spine in it. How? I asked. He moved in behind me, not touching, close enough that heat became instruction. Breath, he said. Narrow your ribs, make the room smaller with you. I did. The world tightened into my palm and the silver under it. Ask it like it already owes you the answer, he said. Has any hand sworn to the chapel, changed this pin to imitate another house? A thin white thread wrote itself and vanished. Better, he said. He reached again, a little closer this time, to take the pin back. Our sleeves brushed. The heat of him climbed into my wrist and stayed like a small winter feels a fire and remembers it later. He said a corked vial next. Dock resin, the one that tasted like cold patience in kitchens. Frame. I pressed my palm flat. Has this compound been touched by blessing in any rite recognized by either court? No line at all. And that clean kind of quiet, that means a room is ready to move with you if you keep your feet. Again, he said. He didn't move away. The chamber had gone very quiet. Fire ticked in the brazier. Wind worried the shutters like a song that didn't know if it wanted to be remembered. My mouth tasted of metal and the linen we'd tied around Jace's side. Has this compound been taken into Ironville by any keeper of rooms? I asked. The Oathglass held steady. Good, he said. Now step into the thing that scares you. I already did that tonight, I said. Do it again, he said, and the corner of his mouth almost found a smile and then decided not to. He slid the goblet out of the light and set his hand in its place. The rail fits an alpha's palm like it was made to be there. Maybe it was. He nodded to the arch as if to ask the mirror to stop enjoying itself and start working. The crown is not just metal, he said. It's the sum of what bends around it. If someone can bend the bending, they don't need to take the metal. Oath steel, I said. Yes. How do you hunt a thing that lives in verbs? I asked. By choosing better ones, he said. I breathed, narrowed my ribs, let the room shrink to the size of my question. Has any recited vow in this keep been diverted from the crown in the last 3 days? The mirror stayed calm. 3 weeks, I asked. Calm. 3 months. A faint bright vein woke and went shy. Spine, he said. Has any recited vow in this keep been diverted from the crown without the speaker's knowledge? The Oathglass lifted a pale filament, trembled and settled again. Not performance, not denial, near. He reached past me for the rail, hand brushing my wrist, adjusting my angle a finger's width like you adjust a blade before it takes hair and not skin. The near-kiss hum found the space between breath and bone and had the good sense to sit there and not move. Anchor it, he said, quiet. Place, time, action. I swallowed. Has any fealty oath sworn beneath this roof in the last fortnight been redirected to a name not spoken? The pale vein leapt. Frost ran across the Oathglass like a cat changing windows, quick, precise, intent. It didn't shatter, it mapped. We both watched. It ran upward, not down, past the rail's reflection, past our hands, up the frame and into the arch where the oath hall begins, across the air like a line only one instrument can hear, up the dais, and then just a breath over the carved canopy above the throne. A spider line kissed crown-carving stone and held a glimmer there like a star that's decided to stay daylight. All the air in the council hall thinned. Again, he said, voice low, as if talking too loud might convince a winter to commit. Has any unseen vow reached for the crown? The line brightened, then dimmed. Has any hand set a siphon to take fealty from the throne to another? A second filament lifted and brushed the first. Not now, I said, not done preparing. The cold crawled along my tongue the way it does when a thing is threaded, not tied. I stepped into the arch, slow. The mirror's veins hummed like wire. "You see it?" he asked. "Yes." "Name it." "Someone is oath-stealing you," I said, and the room didn't bother to argue because the crown above the dais wore the beginnings of a winter it hadn't earned. We stood a breath too long in the spill of that thin frost. The heat between our sleeves remembered itself, and then the moment put its leash on again. He drew his hand off the rail first. "Rule 2, he said, voice steady by choice. "When the mirror shows a future crack, you do not stare. You count the anchors that would make it true." "Anchors," I echoed. "Place, object, ceremony, hands." "Chapel," I said. "Keep counting," he said. "Sideboard, decanter, beacon collars, pins, cloak." I didn't say the shawl. The shawl said itself in the corridor. He nodded once. "We don't guess a name until the geometry can't fit anyone else." "Then we break the geometry," I said. "Knife lesson 3, he said. "When you can't cut, you starve." "Starve the siphon," I said. "Starve the rooms that feed it," he said. "Air, audience, rituals, wine, mirrors that aren't ours." The thread above the throne dimmed as the Oathglass decided it had been patient enough with human nerves for one night. The frost went shy, not gone. The way a line hides in wood until weight finds it. The door at the far end whispered. Holt returned, dry now, hands clean, that pouch tucked where pouches go when they've been promoted to evidence. "Jace?" I asked. "Stitched," Holt said. "Stone quiet, angry he missed the part he didn't miss." "Good," Aldrich said. Holt's attention tilted toward the arch, the dais, the canopy's carved crown. He didn't ask. He's old enough to know when the room will tell him tomorrow. "Orders?" he asked. "Starve chapels," Aldrich said. "Without saying chapel, we will change air, not law. Lysa will sell it before anyone buys rumor." Holt nodded, already moving through the work in his head. "And the crown?" he asked, eyes briefly nodding the nothing over the throne that wasn't nothing at all. "We keep it bored," Aldrich said. "No ceremonies, no fealties, no chances to steal what isn't being offered." He looked to me. "You'll teach the staff to ask like knives." "I'll write a list," I said. "Don't," he said. "Show them, lists get blessed, lessons bring knives." My palms still rested on the rail. Heat had learned the grain. Cold had learned my tongue. I stepped back. He did, too. We found the distance a room requires when it wants to keep you. "Again," he said, and this time it wasn't a command or a lesson. It was a promise that the night wasn't done with us. I turned to the Oathglass and chose the smallest next truth I could pry loose, without giving the room a story it wanted more than the one it needed. The Oathglass had traced a thin future crack over the crown's carving, just enough frost to prove it. Someone was diverting vows toward the throne that wasn't theirs. 3 short bells, then a long dock pattern. Rain shoved the shutters. "South Beacons," Holt said. "Ridge," Aldrich answered. We took the stair that knows feet better than carpet. The parapet threw the city out in cold lines. Warehouses, cranes, the thin white pencils of the beacons pouring down their rain-bright cones. Between cones, the dark was honest. Inside them, the night learned a new trick. They stood on the light. Tall, black-silver figures walked the air above the quay. Not bodies, edges. Armor cut from frost. Eyes where stories would put them. "Vampires," someone said, and the word tried to run. I caught it before it could. "No," I said. "Illusions." The shapes rippled when rain crossed them. Real things don't ripple like that. They held to the same scale no matter the distance, the way drawings pretend depth from one stubborn angle. "Starve them," Aldrich said. Holt was halfway to the signal horn. I touched his sleeve. "Not all," I said. "Drop 1 beacon at a time, watch what moves." He gave me the horn string like a pen. I cut the yard in thirds with a breath. "Kill northeast." Light died in that cone. The nearest specter shivered, turned gray, and slid sideways like a wet chalk line. The shapes in the other beams sharpened, just enough to show how the trick was stitched. Paired collars, one on the beacon lens, one on the chapel vent, the air prints a picture between them. Collars, I said, like the one at the beacon, but paired. One on the tower, one on the chapel's line. The mirror wants an audience. Aldrich's palm kissed the stone, his version of I'm listening. How far back? Where the vents breathe, I tasted metal, and where bells tell smoke how to behave. Shutters on too, Holt called down. Canvas hoods ran along chains, smart hands working pulleys in the rain. 2 beams softened. The specters in those cones sagged like theater cloth and slipped their edges. The ones that remained got bolder in the chapel corridor of light, white-veined, hungry to be seen. The courtyard gate thumped. Jace came up the last steps with the careful speed of a man who remembers stitches only when he has to. He didn't bother with courtesy. He took a spare hood rope and put his shoulders in it. The 3rd cone choked, then folded. The vampires above the fishing slips tried to stand on nothing and discovered nothing is terrible footing. Wind shifted. The sea threw up spray and rumor. Down on dock row, a half-drunk crewman shouted something brave and unhelpful. Doors slammed. A cart tipped. Someone ran, stopped to stare at the sky, then ran again. Rumor moves faster than feet. Night gate, Holt said, still listening to more rooms than this one. Open, Aldrich answered. The gate trumpet called a single note, the permission for a messenger to cross without losing his throat to somebody else's panic. Moments later, a runner hit the steps 2 at a time, rain braided into his hair, hands open. Nocturne signal, he got out. They're holding, they won't move unless ours do. Good, Aldrich said, already turning the city like a wheel. Make that the only story that spreads. A stitched specter lifted a hand in the chapel's light and pointed at the ridge, indulgent as a stage villain. The wolves at the wall growled because wolves are allowed that small theater when the rain is heavy and the wind is rude. I set my knuckles to stone to feel the keep's tremor. Drop Chapel Lane, I said. Holt blew a short call. The canvas on the chapel's nearest beacon flopped, caught, settled. The specter in that cone throttled down to a crooked smear and ran like spilled ink back toward the ridge of roofs the chapel sits under. Hold it, I said. Don't kill the rest. The remaining vampires tried to recruit the dark where the light had gone, failed, and drifted toward what fed them, the beacons still talking to the chapel. It's a 2-point stitch, I said to the rain and the stone. Beacon collar meets chapel collar. The air prints a picture between them. The picture is pre-dressed, nocturne crest shapes, tall bodies, eyes that aren't there. I swallowed the metal in my mouth, and the bells keep time. Aldrich listened to the city. I hear the measure, he said. Change the measure, I said. He didn't look away from the docks. Lysa. Her answer came from the far crenel. Already. A new rhythm drummed across the keep, roof to roof, tower to yard. Omega signaled tempo, not chapel. The smoke around the chapel vents hiccuped, then lost its grace note. In the remaining cones, the specters stuttered and blurred. Down below, the Cade Yard boss cracked crates and slopped salt water across the quay where the light fell. The resin hated it on principle. The vampires, they're turned into weather. Pull west-south, then west-north, I called, and the last of the stitched men died like bad drawings erased by a damp sleeve. The ridge stayed braced for a heartbeat longer than it needed to. The rain turned common again. One by one, the wolves on the wall let their shoulders unlearn a lesson. No horns, no cheers, no war. Only the chapel's roofline kept its pretty smoke. It didn't mind the new rhythm. It preferred any song that asked the room to look at it. Map it, Aldrich said. I crouched under the lee of a merlin and pulled chalk from the ledger strap. The city is a ledger if you draw it right. Budget lines in streets and alleys, audit trails in vents and drains, signatures in light where people forgot they were signing. Beacons here, I said, marking cones. This one flirted hardest. This one held its picture longest. I drew arcs from each cone toward the chapel roof. Cross lines hit the north transept. Transept vents feed the nave, Holt said. Then the sacristy, then the crypt, I finished. But not the public stairs, the service throat behind the sacristy. I added smaller strokes. Salt requisitions doubled. Oil for beacons accounted for, but polish for hardware padded twice. Incense listed under ceremonies that didn't happen tonight. I sketched angles I'd tasted earlier, where the purity glass lives, where the basin sits, where the thuribal's hinge hides a packet the size of a fingernail. Every line wanted to wrap around a room that calls itself gentle. The chalk map became a funnel. Holt watched the edges. Flow like that, there's a low point. Vault, I said. The kind that keeps the floor dry for old bones. The kind, he agreed. Jace tightened the knot on the canvas line and joined us. He didn't need to look at the chalk to know what part of the keep the lines were choosing. He watched the smoke instead, the way it still lifted around the chapel chimneys, even with the rhythm broken. Air moves up, he said, but rooms like that breathe down first. Then someone's drawing, I said. A hand bellows, not a vent. Aldrich didn't say a name. He watched the chapel roof as if the night might confess if he was patient enough. The runner from Nightgate returned, not quite running. Message held, he reported. The Nocturne captain sends word, we will not stomp your docks because your light plays games. We will wait while you change the game. Send back gratitude, Aldrich said, and clean water. Holt repeated it without writing. Some orders are better as air than ink. We didn't go by the nave. We went by the kitchen corridor where bread and wet boots keep opinions. Staff peeled to the sides without dropping their tasks. Rumor likes to see you hurry. Don't give it that. We moved at the speed that tells a room the night is being managed. At the sacristy turn, the air cooled like stone imagining winter. The small door sat in its niche like a good idea people had agreed not to use. It wore no stain of ordinary hands. The lock had been rubbed until it forgot it was metal and started thinking it was a ritual. I'll ask, I said, and set my palm to the wood nowhere near the key. Has any collar of resin been fixed below this door in the last month? A thin shine lifted along the grain, not the glass. The wood had been dusted, not polished. The dust had carried. Has any breath tonight been pulled through this threshold? The shine brightened, the brass whispered. My tongue went cold. Keys, Aldrich said. Holt's ring answered his hand when it arrived. He selected the one that shouldn't have fit. It did, because keys are vows with teeth. Slow, I said. We eased the door. Air slid around our legs, linen, oil, old stone, and under it the thin, sweet cold of a resin bellows cooling after working too hard. Steps slipped under us. The corridor pinched and then opened into a low vault with ribs like a whale's. Holt coaxed a hooded lantern until it purred. Light woke a line across flagstone, not footfalls, not broom. A trail the width of a bead string, pulled, lifted, pulled, lifted. It led away from the public relic racks toward a door half the size of a proper one. The little door had a new hinge hidden inside an old hinge's patience. Jace touched the stone and came up with a glitter that burned cold without heat. He didn't say the name. Neither did I. I unfolded my ledger map and laid it on a coffin lid. Chalk lines from ridge to roof to vent to transept found the only shape they could make when no one lied to them. Every line, beacons, vents, bells, ended at the same narrow hatch. Seraphine's private crypt. The key turned. Cold air rose, linen, stone, and a thin suite under it. Witness, he said. Valerian stepped from the stair mouth, sleeves dry, eyes already doing the math. Quiet feet, we went down. The stair pinched our shoulders, then led us into a ribbed vault. Stone benches, 2 relic niches, a far wall that wasn't a wall, new hinge hidden inside an old hinge's patience. Between here and there, a trail the width of a bead string, pulled, lifted, pulled, lifted. Every third pull left a glitter you could taste without opening your mouth. Valerian slid a shard of his dark glass from a narrow case, tied carved rim catching the lantern. I laid 2 fingers near the seam. Has any vow tonight been drawn through this door? I asked the shard. It darkened and cleared, yes enough to count. Has any vow been kept down here? The glass cooled, no flare, no drama. Storage. Open, I said. Jace eased the latch like he was closing it. Air slid out, linen, oil, old stone, and under it the thin, cold shimmer of Asterium that hadn't finished confessing. The second chamber was small and purposeful. No bones on display, no pious clutter, a table with a bellows and straps, a bank of funnels, copper throats married to glass jars, silver thread and bead lines webbed from vent mouth to a little dais. The dais held a crown, not the throne. A reliquary thing, filigree etched with saint names, rim dotted with tiny sockets. The web hummed without sound. My tongue went cold. "Don't touch," I said. "Harvest," Valerian murmured. "Siphon," I answered. "Asterium carries shape. They've built a path to carry fealty down the vents, through these funnels, into that crown." I crouched at a funnel, a faint ring where dust had been wiped too neatly. The bellows strap wore careful wear where a hand pumps a rhythm, bells keep time. A folded cloth under the dais had left a pale print. A dish of halo pins sat near the bellows, real ones, the model used to copy from. He set the pin in his shard's view. "Ask," I said. "Has blessing been bound to these funnels?" Valerian asked. A small pale breath, then gone. "Yes, from hands that think they're clean." Jace nodded at the bead lines. I gave him plain words. "A one-way gate for vows," I said. "It carries what a speaker thinks they gave to one name and sets it in another, then holds it." I angled the shard at the crown. "Has this crown received diverted fealty in the last fortnight?" A hairline formed, then let go. Near. "Last week." Tremble smoothed. "Tonight." Quiet. "It's a cistern," I said. "They draw when ceremonies run, seed the room so the big glass helps, then store." We followed the web to a side shelf. Bottles labeled orange peel, frankincense, beeswax. Stoppers smelled fine until the last air, where a resin ghost waited, patient and smug. Books, cloth-bound, ledger spines, one set forward by a hair. I slid it free. Careful hand. Dates, names, lines of air. A diary trained to pass for a ledger. Pages. Trials of the vent collars successful. The Oathglass tolerates witness if smoke is taught to behave. Nocturne won't move if we say purity often enough. Fealty siphons only under music. Bells must keep time. Rooms love rhythm. Rhythm makes rooms gentle. A crown is not a crown. It is the shape men choose to pour themselves into. If we teach the shape to forget its name, it will pour for us. We do not need to remove him. We need to move through him. He will call it prudence. The ribbon marked a page, pressed harder than the rest. He is stubborn. He prefers truth to theater. We will teach the room to prefer theater and call it truth. Once the crown forgets what it is, the accords can end. Valerian's shard held the words like a witness that can't be disinvited. "Break it," Jay said. "Not yet," I said. "We need proof for rooms that like to be entertained." Valerian turned the shard back to the crown. "Has this reliquary been made to receive a name that isn't written on it?" A fine white hair like a tongue felt crack. "Yes." Jace stitched a thin thread tail into the diary's spine, Omega trick. We set the book where it had been, and didn't. We backed out. The vault received us. The hinge remembered how to be old. Up the stair, lantern hooded, kitchen air, bread and wet boots telling the truth the big rooms try to forget. He waited at the turn, exact, not impatient. "Report." "Funnels, beadweb, bellows to vents," I said. "A reliquary crown taught to hold what oaths think they gave you." I lifted the diary. We moved to the map table under the pale spill of the Oathglass. Valerian took the witness place. I opened to the ribboned page. The hand that usually wore kindness had pressed too hard. The words stopped pretending. "Seat a pliant king." "End the accords." Paper breathed under my fingers. Valerian's shard held the ink like a witness that refused to blink. Holt didn't move, but his posture told me 5 orders were already choosing their boots. "Now," Aldrich said. We didn't rehearse. We walked map table to corridor, corridor to Oath Hall, at the speed that tells a room the night is already being managed. Lysa's step ghosted ahead, benches filled as if called by tide. Nobles slid into their places with quiet jewelry and opinions. The standard waited on its dais, black field cut with the wolf in silver thread. The Oathglass threw its pallor across the rail, patient as arithmetic. Valerian took the witness place without speaking. Jace stood bare-shouldered under a clean bandage, jaw set. Stitches remembered they were human, then minded their manners. Aldrich didn't ask for silence. He made it. "Witness," he said. I laid the diary open to the pressed hard page. I didn't lift it high. I angled it so the Oathglass could see. "Her own hand," I said, and let the room read the letters it wanted to trust, polite, tidy, merciless. A murmur rose, small and tidy too. Holt set the bell tempo, Omega rhythm, not chapel, and let it sink into the wood. "Questions," Aldrich told the glass. I placed my palm to rail. "Has any collar of resin shaped light to carry fealty into a reliquary below this hall?" The mirror breathed a pale thread and let it settle. "Yes." Lysa's quill didn't scratch. She listens in ink you can't see. "Has any hand sworn to chapel bound the funnels?" A twitch, not drama. Yes, enough to count. Seraphine arrived on a quiet seam of air and stood where kind women stand when they intend to confirm that they are kind. Shawl exact. Hands folded. Acolytes like punctuation behind her. "High matron," Aldrich said. "Nothing more. He does courtesy the way a cliff does by existing." "You are worried," she said to the room, sympathy shaped to fit multiple throats. "Worry makes rooms cruel. Let us be gentle." "Gentle has been busy," I said. She looked at the diary as if it were a toddler that had wandered into a grown conversation. "Script can be forged. Rooms pass notes. Children misunderstand." I didn't give her the kindness of reacting. "Has this book been written by the same hand that keeps sanctuary logs?" I asked the glass. A fine pale hair answered, "Yes." Her smile didn't change. "And yet, child, we must speak of you." The turn was clean. The room leaned toward it because rooms like faces more than engines. She lifted a small object from inside her sleeve. A claim ribbon, white, folded, sealed with a wax bead stamped long ago and kept out of weather. My stomach went cold faster than the Oathglass ever could. "Names," she said softly. "We all hide them, some for safety, some for advantage." She held the ribbon where the mirror could read it if it wanted to. "You have served as Omega bookkeeper. You have called yourself nobody so that numbers would listen, but numbers keep memory." Holt's head tipped a hard degree. Jace didn't move. Seraphine eased the seal with a thumbnail that had seen too much practice. "Birth register," she said, letting the old strip breathe. "Year stamped, midwife mark, father's name." She did not look at me when she said it. She let the room enjoy saying it first. "Arden, Beta of Ironville." A small shiver went through the benches, pleasure disguised as concern. Nobles leaned back a half-inch, as if a bloodline could stain through the air. Omega girls dropped eyes because they know how to survive cold. The Oath Hall itself seemed to sit up straighter. Rooms love open secrets. I kept my hand on the rail. I did not let it shake. Seraphine folded the ribbon again, neatly, as if she were putting a child to bed. "It is natural to wish to correct the men who cost us our childhoods," she told me, and that soft tone, "I know you, I forgive you," was a blade with lace on it. "Natural to punish an order that forgot what your father was owed." "Do you mean the order that siphons vows to its private crown?" Valerian asked, mild as frost. His shard did a small, disinterested tilt toward the diary. Seraphine almost looked at him. Almost. "Do you mean the court that opens its doors to men who drink under different moons?" she murmured, not to him, to the room. "We are all making allowances tonight." Aldrich's palm kissed the rail once. The glass woke a little, as if it hated her politeness. "Has any false mark tonight been drawn to implicate Nocturne?" I asked. The line appeared and divorced itself from performance. "Yes." A few knuckles whitened along the benches. People remember their manners when the mirror stops tolerating theirs. She didn't flinch. She carried a different page under the ribbon and laid it on the rail like a harmless napkin, ledger extract from the year the Pax bled over quarry rights. Names that used to be rooms. A narrow column that said remittance for Arden's household, and then, a month later, remittance ceased. "Motives," she said, a regretful music to the word. Who among us doesn't carry one? Has any vow spoken in this hall been diverted away from the crown in the last month? I asked. The Oathglass rode a clear frost hair and refused to be shy. The room cooled. Seraphine's shawl remembered to breathe. Perhaps we should avoid the cruelty of details, she murmured. Let the child sit aside until morning's light makes truth less sharp. Name me child again, I said, and we can count the nights I kept your books while men twice my age wept because they didn't know how addition works. A ripple, quickly ashamed of itself. She gave me sorrow. You hide your name, that is not a crime, it is a pattern. Patterns make engines, I said. Engines drain kings. I felt the moment the room decided it would like it better if I were a problem made by men, not a problem made by numbers. It's easier to hate a daughter than a diagram. That's why people build chapels, soft story skins for hard machines. The first noble stood, gold chain at his shoulder, righteous fatigue at his mouth. Majesty, he said to Aldrich without looking at me. It is unseemly to let a beta's blood try a matron's work. The accords are spoken by people who remember their place. Let her step back, tonight of all nights. More stood. They always stand in sets so they can be wrong together. The hall's temperature slid from rain-cool to cold. Even the Omegas who'd watched me grow rhythms in empty ledgers flicked their gaze aside because winter teaches bodies to face the wind and pretend it's a choice. Lysa did not stand. Holt did not. Jace took one calm breath and shifted his stance to the angle that opens his ribs to a strike and says, try. I didn't move. I counted the rail's tiny silver pits where generations have set their palms and forgotten to moisturize after. Aldrich moved. The dais ladder is 3 steps. He took them like a man walking into his own kitchen. He unshipped the standard. Blackfield heavy with the stitched wolf, silver haft balanced in his hand, as if it had weight and temper both. He came down off the dais and crossed the pale of the Oathglass. He planted the standard in the seam where the dais marble meets the hall stone. The haft's tip, finding a socket generations forgot, was carved there for nights that require line drawing. The sound it made was not loud. Rooms remember it. He didn't raise his voice. He let the banner speak height while he used plain. She stands, he said, mine to keep, not ownership, stewardship, the same vow he had made over smoke that tried to write a winter on my brow. My court is not so fragile that a hidden name unthreads it. My hall is not so polite that it will hand knives to anyone who asks softly. The nobles who had stood looked suddenly very far from the door. Aldrich set his palm on the rail. Has this witness lied to this mirror? He asked. The Oathglass did nothing at all, which is the same as no when a king asks cleanly. Has the chapel lied to this mirror? The pale hair glinted. The room tried not to shiver. Seraphine folded the ribbon again. Each crease was a small apology to a god she would never meet. You are asking the room to choose between heritage and peace, she said, and left the sentence a shape people could pour themselves into. Before Aldrich could answer, a cane kissed stone. The sound travels differently when Myra chooses to be heard. The dowager stepped from the shadow the mirror and memories make for her and placed herself where the hall's thoughts must turn. Enough, she said, not unkind. No one sat, no one breathed loudly, even the banner remembered to be air. You want peace, she told the nobles. You want heritage, she told Seraphine. You want arithmetic, she told me, and her mouth nearly smiled. You want the accords, she told Aldrich. The look between them didn't move, but it counted 50 years without touching the abacus. We will have proof, she said, not theater. She let the cane's tip draw a small circle in the seam at the base of the standard's haft, as if remembering other nights when other lines were drawn. One night, she said, and the room learned the measure of the words because every winter in Ironville has been arranged around the way Myra pronounces numbers. Sunrise to sunrise, she added. If this chapel is false, you will show us its machine breathing. If it is true, the child sits down and stays quiet, and we will all pretend this conversation was never necessary. Her gaze touched Seraphine the way cold touches brass. You will open your rooms, she said, Every room that breathes under your name. Every hinge that learned new patience this year. Seraphine's hands folded tighter under the shawl, but the shawl did not move. Myra looked to me, not indulgent, exact. You will walk this house and put your palm where truth hides. You will do it without making a mess, and you will not break what you can starve. She looked to Aldrich. Your standard stands between the girl and your nobles until the last bell. A pause. Then it stands between your city and whatever breathes under her floors. Silence sorted itself into places where it would be tolerated. Aldrich inclined once. Done. Holt nodded as if he had just been told to fetch bread, not reprieve. Lysa's quill finally kissed paper. Valerian slid his shard back into its case with a gesture that promised it would be where I needed it before I knew I needed it. Seraphine bowed her head the degree a room expects from mercy. We will be ready at dawn, she said. The words felt clean. The air behind them did not. The nobles sat, one by one, as if gravity had learned manners. The banner's weight remembered the socket and stayed. Jace's eyes found mine over the haft. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The word always lived in the angle of his shoulder like a vow that prefers bone to speech. I kept my palm on the rail until the cold in it agreed to be useful. Myra's cane marked the seam. One night, make the chapel show its breath or be swallowed by the story it wrote for us. The cane's circle still shone faintly in the seam by the banner's haft. One night. The hall began to breathe again, benches scraping, jewelry whispering, rumor stitching itself to hems. Holt peeled off with quiet orders. Lysa's quill vanished like a dagger into a sleeve. Jace stayed at the standard's shadow, shoulder a small vow. Valerian closed his shard case and didn't leave. Aldrich's hand remained on the rail a breath longer than the room deserved. Then, work! He didn't look at nobles. He looked at us. We'll starve rooms, I said. Already turning vents, Holt answered from the doorway. Laundry stack pulls chapel breath east by dawn. Rumor, Aldrich asked. Lysa didn't smile. I'll sell-proof hunt before anyone buys heritage tantrum. Good, Aldrich said. His gaze returned to me and didn't waver. The Oathglass cast its cold along the rail. I felt it like weather I had decided to walk in. Valerian spoke into the space the banner kept for us. You're visible, he said to me, not unkind. Not because you stood here, because the engine is built to want you. His sleeve barely moved. There's a ward I can lend, stronger than a veil, cleaner than theater. Aldrich's jaw found a line. We don't need. We do, I said, before the room could choose pride and call it policy. If I've got to put my palm on every hinge in her house before sunrise, I'd rather not feed her bellows with every step. Valerian did not look at Aldrich when he added, no claim. Borrowed night only, 3 nights. Define it, I said. Words are locks. Veil bond, he said. We braid a ward veil to your pulse for 3 nights. It lends you our signature, not enough to offend your wolves, just enough that her funnels smell the wrong winter and let you pass. It dissolves at dawn on the 4th. No mark, no hold. A beat. I do it on the bridge. Air likes honest work. Aldrich's palm left the rail. We will not owe Nocturne for my auditor's breath. Valerian didn't rise. You won't. You'll owe me for a cloth and 12 words. I met Aldrich's eyes. I choose not being harvested, I said plain. He heard it the way he hears a wage you can't pay late without consequences. He didn't look at Valerian. He looked at the banner's haft, at the socket, at the seam Myra had circled. Then he gave the smallest nod a king can give and still call it his. Do it in our air. Valerian tipped his head. Your sky, then. We left the hall the way you set down a heavy book, careful, without slamming. The corridor breathed stone and the faint sweetness of spilled wine that never learned shame. Jace moved with us, not quite touching my shoulder. Always, he said, so quietly it made no ripple, and took the post at the arch to keep eyes pointed away from the edge we were about to stand on. The skybridge opened the night like a held breath. Lanterns were steady, tide-shouldered pylons. Rain had settled into the patient kind that belongs to conversations. Valerian set a small kit on the glass, silver thread, a square of veil cloth like the one he'd loaned me, a thumb vial of clean salt water, a pin so fine it might as well be a thought. "Talk me through it," I said. "Name, breath, 3 measures," he said. "Salt for boundary, veil for cover, thread for time. I give the ward to your pulse, you give it back at dawn 3 days from now." Aldrich watched from the arch with Holt just behind, the banner a black seam in my periphery even here. He didn't step in. He didn't step away. Valerian dipped the cloth corner in the salt water and wrung it once, precise. He tied one end of the silver thread to the veil's edge and let the rest pool in his palm. "Right wrist," he said. I offered it. The night lay cool on my skin. The bridge hummed under my bones. "No claim," I said again. "None," he said. "If I'm lying, the glass will yawn and swallow me later." He didn't bother to make it sound like a joke. He wrapped the damp veil once around my wrist, light as breath. He didn't touch more than fabric had to touch. Then he set his fingertips to the cloth and spoke as if reading a line he'd written 100 years ago and still respected. "Borrowed night, surrendered at dawn. No chain, no hunger, no hand. 3 veils, 3 nights." He looked to me. "Your turn." I let my voice be as exact. "I take cover without debt. I keep my name. I return what is not mine at dawn on the 4th. He lifted the fine pin, pricked his own thumb, not mine, and let a single dark drop fall into the salt water. It bled like ink and then thinned to a gray that smelled like cooled iron. He dabbed that to the veil's edge. "Signature, not claim," he said. "Say it." "Signature, not claim." The cloth cooled against my pulse, then warmed to match it. The thread tugged once as if learning the beat. He tied the silver thread around the veil's knot, not touching skin. "3 nights," he said, and tugged the end so the extra length lay free, a tail I could cut any time with a nail. "If you want out sooner, pull here. It falls like fog. It leaves nothing." He lifted his hand away. The cloth didn't glow or whisper. It simply existed, cooling my skin the way moonlight does when a hallway opens to air. "What if I walk into her vent breath?" I asked. "You'll taste cold," he said. "But you won't carry it. The funnels will misread you. They'll think you're mine." I looked to Aldrich. He held my gaze and gave me policy without theater. "Survive," he said. Jace's jaw flexed once, and then he found the hinge he'd been holding for me the whole night. "If anything pulls," he said, "I cut the thread myself." I breathed slow to let the veil find my measure. The bridge thrummed. Far below, lightning stitched itself sideways across the sea and pretended it had always planned to be quiet. "Test," Valerian said, and drew from his kit a sliver of the same asterium collar we'd lifted off the beacon, a harmless scrap if any of it could be. He held it near, not touching. The air around my wrist went wintercool and stopped. The cold didn't climb. It looked for me and found veil. "Again," I said. He brought the sliver closer. The cold kissed the cloth and gave up. The silver thread warmed. Holt's shoulders loosened a degree. Aldrich's didn't. Valerian wound the spare thread into a neat circle and tucked it back. "Bells will still itch," he said. "Don't stand under them and expect to feel noble." "Never have," I said. A bell chimed from the keep, not chapel measure, Lysa's calmer rhythm. Staff to posts, kitchens to quiet, eyes on gates. We walked back under that honesty. Inside, the planning room was already smaller than Pride. Chalk map, ledger, coil of rope on a chair because someone didn't have time to put it back. Lysa slid carnets across the table. Access, names, the doors Myra had promised would open. "She posted notices on the outer cloister," Lysa said, ink dry. "Polite words for don't get in the way while we clean the floor." "Rooms?" Holt asked me. "Begin with vents," I said. "Transept collars, sacristy hinge, crypt latch, reliquary dais, bellows strap, if I were her eyed." "Move the engine," Jace said. "No," I said. "She built patience into it. Patience hates running. She'll hide the handles, not the machine." Aldrich drew a line with his finger along the chalk funnel I'd left earlier. "Then we show handles," he said. "Without breaking. We make numbers talk where sermons can't sing." Valerian stayed at the threshold. The ward he'd tied to me made a quiet circle in the air that didn't reach him. "I'll keep Night still on the bridge," he said. "If she tries a spectacle, I'll starve the audience." A guard at the door cleared his throat with a respectful kind of guilt. "Forgive, Majesty, messenger from the cloister gate." "Send," Aldrich said. An acolyte entered with rein at her hem and a face trained to look like paper. She set a sealed announcement on the table, bowed to the banner, never to me, and stepped back into her orders. Holt cracked the wax. He read without moving his lips, then turned the sheet so the header faced us all. Moon Tribunal. Tomorrow night. Second bell. Lysa hissed, soft air between teeth that prefer ink to drama. Jace went very still. "Of course," Valerian said. He didn't bother to make it sound like a surprise. "Give the city theater before you give it truth. Make the room choose a story while the engine hums under the floor." Aldrich's expression didn't change. He only asked one thing: jurisdiction. Holt's thumb tapped the lower line. "Chapel claims custom. Questions of purity and peace under lunar witness." My wrist cooled under the veil. The thread warmed back. "Good," I said and meant it. "Then we get to work while she sets the stage." Aldrich nodded once. "Sunrise to sunrise," he said, echoing Myra. "Holt rooms, Lysa mouths, Jace eyes, Valerian keep our sky clean." He looked to me last. "Take what you need," he said. "Break nothing you can starve." I tucked the carnets into my ledger, tested the veil's tail once with a fingernail, and let the bridge hum live in my bones as a metronome. "Let's go teach the house how to breathe," I said. Down the corridor, the chapel bells tried a gentle cadence and then remembered they were under new management. The oath hall kept its cool. The acolyte's notice lay on the map table, the ink clean as a blade. The parchment seal dried hard. Moon Tribunal tomorrow night. Seraphine had set the stage. We had one dawn to make her engine fail on it. The acolyte's notice still lay on the map table when we stepped out. The corridor kept the kind of hush stone prefers after difficult decisions. Lysa peeled off toward the outer cloister. Holt vanished toward vents. Valerian turned for the bridge. The banner's shadow fell behind us and stayed. Jace caught my pace at the first narrow turn where a slit window let the rain draw a silver line down the wall. He didn't touch me. He stood where sound goes to learn better manners. "Say it fast," I told him, because nights like this are expensive. His jaw worked once, then he found plain. "It's not your crown I wanted, it's your quiet." The words hit the air and folded it into a smaller, truer room. My wrist cooled under the veil and then warmed to match me again. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "Not a key, not a name, He exhaled like someone putting a blade back where it lives. "Let me stand where the trouble comes first." "You already do," I said. "I mean you," he said, eyes steady. "Doorway, stair mouth, bad angle by the sacristy latch. Don't tell me to stand with the others when the line breaks." His voice stayed quiet. "You don't owe me yes, just don't give me no." I let the window's thin silver run down the stone between us. The veil's tail lay against my pulse like a polite promise. People always want vows to sound warmer than they are. The best ones don't. They just hold. "You know what it looks like," I said. "Then let it look," he said. "I'll take the looking, it keeps knives busy." "You were supposed to be arguing with a bandage," I said. "Done," he said. "It lost." He almost smiled. It almost stayed. Then the night remembered its schedule. "You don't want the crown," I said. "I want your quiet," he repeated, softer. "The way your breathing steadies a room, the way numbers stop lying when you look at them, and if it has to be said out loud for me to be allowed to stand here, consider it said." He slid his gaze past my shoulder to the seam of dark where the corridor kinks. "If you say go, I go. If you don't, I don't." A corridor drafts promises differently than halls do. The Oathglass likes verbs. Stone prefers weight. "Stand," I said. Relief didn't show. He only shifted the set of his shoulders to the angle that gives him reach without crowding me. Familiar, careful. The word always lived there, stripped of ceremony. We moved, past the storeroom with the busted latch, past the little door nobody uses when the house thinks it's behaving. The castle kept offering us places where a person could be made to disappear prettily. Jace arranged himself between each and my ribs with the stubborn grace of a hinge that refuses to squeal. "You're going to hate this part," he said finally. "What part?" "When they turn kindness into a net." I tasted brass. They already started. We crossed the western ambulatory where the air has the faint smell of bread no matter the hour if the ovens have been honest. A page trotted by with a quiet face and a tray of keys, saw me, saw Jace, and decided sight was a luxury he couldn't afford. Good boy. At the next landing, I stopped to breathe the veil on my wrist like you taste a word before you say it to a crowd. Cool, then warm. Not a chain. Borrowed night. "You don't owe me anything," Jace said, likely because he could hear me counting debts I had no interest in. "If you change your mind about me at any turn in this hall, tell me. I'll step back. I'll still be the first wall at the bad angles. I can do both." "You asking for permission to keep your bad habits," I said. "I'm asking permission to make them useful," he said. I let the corner of my mouth think about it. Granted. We took the sacristy corridor, not to open anything, just to teach our feet the measure of the floor before the house tried to change it. Myra had given us one night. Rooms love to pretend dawn will not arrive if they refuse to look east. At the arch that looks down into the cloister garden, a draft braided our clothes. Rain threaded the lanterns. The laundry stacks pulled chapel breath to the east as ordered. I could taste the difference, less sweet in the wrong places, more honest in the right. Jace leaned in, not close, just enough to keep his voice ours. "When you were small," he said, words careful as poultice, "did you ever sit behind the baker's stall after market and count what was left?" "Every week." "Me too," he said. "That's what this feels like. The night sold a lot of lies. We're counting what remains." "You think we can pay the balance?" I said. "I think we can refuse to be overcharged," he said. We hit the inner stair and turned down toward the transept vents. Holt's chalk code was already on the landing. 2 circles and a bar, meaning dampers moved, airflow east, no prayer smoke. Good. The engine would hate the new diet. "I need you to say it," he added, too lightly, like someone tossing a coin that means more than its stamp. "That you meant it. The stand." "I meant it," I said. He nodded once. He didn't collect the word. He filed it where it could be used if needed and otherwise left it alone. The corridor bent again. Stone remembered other winters. Somewhere above, a door's old hinge complained because it had decided to earn its keep loudly. Far below, tides shouldered the pylons, keeping faith with the bridge. We were 3 turns from the transept when the first bell rang. Not the lean omega tempo Lysa had given the keep, not the gate note that keeps messengers alive. Chapel measure. 1, 2, pause, 3 in a quick braid. The sound felt like a hand drawing a loop around a crowd and calling it safety. Jace's head cocked. "You know that pattern." "Invitation cadence," I said. The words felt stupid in my mouth. "High feast, witness vigil, holiday procession." The second bell set answered from the south cloister. A third from the east. Each found the same sweet cadence the chapel trains for festivals. The air itself tried to remember being kinder. A girl in laundry gray hurried past with her sleeves rolled, stopped, turned toward the cloister door as if someone had put her name in the sound. 2 more omegas came out of a side passage and did the same, faces open, eyes a little bright the way people look when the whole house agrees on something that will be gentle and therefore good. "Keep moving," I told myself more than him. "We know what's breathing under those floors." We reached the cloister arch and looked down. Acolytes had already opened the inner gates and were laying ribbons on a long table, white, folded, stamped with wax. Polite words on a slate, witness welcome, comfort provided, safety ensured. The kind of language you use when you want the rooms to organize themselves. An outer line formed, all soft voices and shawls, no force. Invitations held up like lanterns. Come, sit, sing. The small door at the far end wore a notice. OMEGAS first in letters tall enough to see and still pretend you weren't shouting. Jace didn't swear. He made the sound of a person setting a crate down because throwing it would draw the wrong eyes. Hostages, I said. Yes, he said, very polite ones. We stood for one long breath while the house showed us its next costume. Rain stitched the garden thin. The bells sketched another loop. Acolytes smiled with professional mercy. Two young dishwomen clasped hands, relieved to be shepherded somewhere warm while night needed the windows. Say the thing, Jace murmured. Invitation isn't consent, I said, and first is a threat when it comes from the wrong mouth. He angled his body so mine was the only direction the corridor could choose. Tell me where you want me. Here, I said, at this arch, half step inside the door. If anyone moves the latch on that small gate, you unlearn your manners and you don't apologize. And you. I go teach the table how to count. How many? He asked. As many as it takes to break a net made out of kindness. He nodded. He put his back to the jam like a promise and let his hands hang empty where everyone could see them. Empty hands scare rooms that prefer lace on their knives. The bells made the loop again. The notice on the door didn't change its ink. The line of omegas lengthened, patient by training, grateful by habit, unaware by design. I tucked the veil against my pulse and stepped toward the table where the ribbons lay like a plan, pretending to be comfort. The chapel's invitation cadence braided the cloister. Omegas first! Smiles and ribbons and open doors, kindness as a net. The house was gathering witnesses, which is to say, hostages. The ribbons looked innocent the way nets do when they're folded. Counting, I told the nearest acolyte, voice tidy as a ledger note. I sorted stacks by wax tone and thread weight, 3 grades, all stamped this week. Lysa drifted up with a smile that wasn't for them and palmed 2 into her sleeve. Holt took the slate, rewrote omegas first as omegas seated with kin, then moved the table 2 steps toward the outer door so no one would forget where Day lived. Jace stayed where I put him, half a step inside the arch, empty hands visible, shoulders speaking try me in a dialect stone understands. When the bells ran the invitation loop again, fewer feet answered. You can starve a trap by feeding people information. We worked the hours down to dawn. Vents pulled east. Collars we couldn't remove we salted. Valyrian kept the bridges night thin as cloth. By midday the keep breathed different. By dusk the city had stopped trying to see vampires where lights fell. Second bell after moonrise came with rain hard enough to clean stone. Moon Tribunal. We went in together, Aldrich, Holt, Lysa, Valyrian shadow clean, Jace at the hinge. The oath hall waited with its best face. Tears full, nobles bright, omegas in shawls along the side benches, acolytes soft as sugar at the edges. The banner stood in its socket. The Oathglass gleamed like a lake that had finally decided to enjoy being watched. Seraphine arranged herself where kind women stand when they're about to bruise a room with mercy. Shawl exact, palms mild, voice turned to velvet. Witness, she said, and the word made a loop. We will clear rumor, we will restore trust, begin with vows. She lifted a hand. 2 acolytes ushered 3 witnesses forward, Omega girls I knew by kitchen habits and laundry songs. Each held a ribbon like a throat holds a swallow. Seraphine guided the first to the rail and did the thing she's best at. She borrowed the girl's posture and fed it a script. Say after me, she told the child gently. I swear my peace to Ironville and to the God who breathes in the chapel. The girl repeated it, soft, obedient. The Oathglass purred. A pale line wrote itself like frost saying good. Now, Seraphine said, I pity the court that misleads our king with foreign tempers and impure bread. I renounce their theater. The line brightened. People like lines that tell them who to dislike. Stop, Aldrich said not loud. Seraphine tilted sorrow. Majesty, we must let the city speak. Let it speak for itself, I said, palms flat on the rail. Not through your hand. She is a child, Seraphine said. So was I said. My veil cooled at the wrist, then found my pulse. Valyrian stood at the witness place with his shard stowed, silent as night. Holt's bell beat the Omega tempo, not chapel. The hall decided it would be embarrassed if it pretended not to notice. I breathed the way Aldrich taught me. Ribs narrow, room small. Questions have a point-edge spine, I told myself. Point first. I turned to the Oathglass and made my nouns unwiggle. Has any vow composed by another mouth been fed to this witness as if it were hers? A hairline answered, shy and honest, yes. A murmur pulled at the benches and then remembered itself. Edge, I said quietly. Has any hand sworn to the chapel written, vows this hour meant to steer the mirror to pity them? The line brightened, not theater, fact. Spine, I said, and felt Aldrich's attention place itself behind my shoulder like heat. Has any vow spoken in this hall since the first bell been shaped by Asterium, so that light pretends to be obedience? The glass did not like the verb. A white tremor crossed it like winter trying a window, then another. The surface cleared and came back thinner, like a breath taken through teeth. Seraphine's kindness did not move. Poor child, she said to the girl at the rail. Confusion is catching. Let her speak her words, I said. The girl's hands clenched the ribbon. She swallowed. I swear my peace to Ironville, and I swear I don't know what the rest means. The line the glass had written softened to something closer to clean. Seraphine exhaled forgiveness for us all and called up her next trick. A scroll from under her shawl, a pale ribbon of names, dozens, all lined like neat soldiers, fealties copied for record. She set it on the rail and the Oathglass purred again because it loves paper that believes in itself. Motives, she said to the room with gentle regret. We all carry them. I kept my breath small. Anchor place, time, action, I murmured. Then I set the blade. Has any fealty named on this scroll been recited in this hall by the person whose name is written? The Oathglass paused, as if insulted. Then, a delicate no, the kind a mirror makes when it has to admit the polite thing is false. Seraphine's shawl breathed. Majesty, this is cruelty to clerks, not justice to rooms. We copied vows so the record would outlive reign. Ask it what we fear, Aldrich said, plain, not to me, to the room. I took the last step, to where the rail's silver bites the palm, and the glass hears you like you never learned to lie. Has any vow this month been diverted from the crown to a name not spoken? The Oathglass lifted a filament of frost. Has any lattice of Asterium been set behind this glass to teach it which stories to prefer? A second filament woke and crossed the first. Show me, I said. Mirrors aren't people, but they like verbs. The pale threads flared and then multiplied. Hair-thin lines racing outward from the rail's reflection up into the frame, across the corners, nesting like spiderwork. The hall made a sound I'd never heard it make, an unlearned one. The frost didn't shatter. It crazed, finding the paths that had been waiting in the backing, a lattice of bead dust and resin stitched under black paint where no honest thing should be. It lit like constellations nomming themselves. Who said it? A noble demanded, suddenly brave now that fear had a picture. I didn't look at him. I kept the knife on the board. Has any hand sworn to chapel fixed the lattice behind this glass? The frost brightened to a thin winter sunrise. Seraphine folded her hands tighter. This is sacrilege to mechanisms, she said softly. If we break our tools in public, we'll have nothing left to trust. Then stop lying to them, I said. The Oathglass began to hum, not polite, not small, a sound like a kiln holding its breath. Tiny cracks chased the lattice where it had been fed too much song. In the frame, a dust no one else could taste scoured my tongue cold. Aldrich didn't move. Jace took one measured step nearer the rail. Ask the last thing, Holt said, voice the size of a key. I did. Has this glass ever shown a picture not born of its oath? The surface flared white. The first pop came like a knuckle against a table. The second like ice deciding it had better things to do. Then the lattice overrode itself. Too much winter crammed into a narrow season, and the Oathglass let go, not a violent shatter, but a giving way, 1,000 silk-light pieces slumping forward, ringing the rail with safe, bright chimes. Behind it, the Asterium lattice stood naked, the way a stage looks when the curtain forgets it isn't a wall. People gasped because rooms enjoy confession when it wears jewelry. Seraphine didn't gasp. She reached inside the fold of her shawl for something that looked like a rosary and wasn't. Valerian's chin lifted a degree. "Don't," he began. Too late. The rosary split like a snake eating its skin and bloomed into 3 hinged funnels the size of a hand. She clapped it over the nearest wall sconce and pulled a hidden wire that had lived inside the stone, since the keep had other names. Old smoke chutes woke overhead. The kind masons build to carry kitchen accidents away as if the house were too dignified to burn. They opened like gills along the cornice. A sweet, clever smoke rushed the seams. Lanterns hiccuped. The air cooled where it should have warmed. Holt threw a hood over one chute. Jace was already at another, shoving a baffle plate with his shoulder and a curse soft enough for the old gods. Lysa went for mouths, not windows. Stay seated. Breathe low. Look at me. Because panic moves faster than feet. Seraphine stepped back into the gray that loved her. "You asked for proof," she said, voice kind as rain. "You poor, earnest child, you've given me a stage." She touched the wall and vanished into it. Panel, passage. The smoke drew her like a signature to a line. "Bridge," Valerian snapped, already running. "I'll choke the sky." "Doors," Holt barked. "Standard," Aldrich said, and his hand found the haft. He planted it again. "Stay," and half the hall obeyed because banners are good at teaching knees. I tasted winter behind my teeth and felt the veil at my wrist hold against it. I didn't chase her yet. She'd set the exits to swallow whoever ran first. "Air first," I told Jace, grabbing the nearest bellows hood and slamming it over the wake of a chute. "Then engines, then names." Rain struck the high windows hard enough to count. The hall's best face was gone. The room finally did what rooms do when truth knocks furniture over. It looked like work. Chutes gaped like gills and drank the hall. Seraphine slipped into the walls with smoke for a cloak and the storm for alibi. The Oath Hall didn't sound like a hall anymore. Chutes still gaped like gills along the cornice, leaking sweet gray. Jace and I slammed bellows hoods over the worst of them while Holt and Lysa moved bodies, not furniture. Stay seated. Breathe low. Eyes on me. Because panic outruns feet if you let it. Aldrich's banner stayed planted in the seam, holding the room in place like a hand on a throat. Then the first siren hit. It wasn't chapel bells. It wasn't gate notice. It was worse. Iron throats on the Nightport line, wailing in a climb that tells the docks to get knives and tells everybody else to get behind someone larger. Holt's head snapped toward the high windows. "That's South Key," he said. The second siren answered from farther west, harsher, layered with a pulse beat under the scream. "Warehouse Row," Jace said. A third cut across both, higher, thinner, resentful. The one they only use when fire or riot gets to the crates with city seals. I felt the hall tighten around the sound like a fist. Seraphine wasn't just running. She was already throwing matches. "Majesty," Holt said. Aldrich had already unseated the standard. "Lysa, hold this hall," he said. His voice wasn't raised. "That's how you know a king is done negotiating. No one leaves on chapel orders, nobody." "Yes, Majesty," she said, already stepping into the center lane, quill gone, hands up where people trust palms more than ink. "Holt," Aldrich said, "dock line with me." "Always," Holt said. "Jace," Aldrich said without turning, "you're Omega tonight. You move our quarters east and you don't let anyone tell you you're gentle." Jace didn't pretend it wasn't an order that could get him killed. "Understood." Aldrich looked at me last. "You go with him." I nodded. He held my gaze a fraction too long. The look said, "You are more dangerous alive than brave." Then he and Holt were moving, fast, standard in his hand, storm already answering him from the high slits. The sirens wailed again. This time other sounds rode under them, voices carried up from the city through the storm. Not words yet, shapes of words. Crowds don't start in sentences. They start in anger sound. The hall tried to follow Aldrich with its eyes the way a flock follows the first wing that moves. "Keep breathing," Lysa told them, calm as a ledger page. "We are not done counting. You blink and we'll reshelve you by accident, and then you'll complain about where we put you, and frankly, I don't have time. Half the Omegas along the benches actually huffed little shaky laughs. That gave them something to do other than panic. Smart woman. I grabbed my ledger, pressed 2 fingers to the veil on my wrist, felt the cool settle and warm again. Still holding. Valerian's thread hummed once like a pulse check. Move, Jace said. We left the oath hall through the service door, not the main. Jace took point this time, not because I needed shepherding, but because if something ugly jumped from a corner, he'd rather it met him first. I let him. He asked to stand. I'd said yes. You don't unsay a yes until you mean it. The corridor outside the hall shook once, solid, like a hand hitting stones somewhere deeper in the keep. Storm, I asked. Feet, he said. Too many at once. We hit the intersection by the laundry arch. The air there had cleared. Holt's dampers had dragged chapel breath east like ordered. Good, but I could hear new noise bleeding in from the lower levels. Not running, gathering. Say it, Jace murmured. They're pulling people, I said. She's calling a vigil. Under sirens, he said. Under sirens, I repeated. That was the play. Wrap fear in holiness, call it duty, march it into a room you control. We took the next stair down, stone worn thin in the middle, rails smooth with years of hands hauling themselves to bed exhausted. The smell changed. Bread, soap, wet wool, the warm lived-in steam that always leaks from Omega quarters no matter how clean the day has been. Sounds, 2 pots, murmurs, a half-hummed work tune someone hadn't had time to finish. Familiar. Jace slowed before the bottom landing. Let me walk in first, he said quietly. If you think I'm hiding behind you. It's not hiding, he said. It's math. They'll listen faster if I say by Aldrich first. You can't afford to waste 30 seconds convincing them you're not Chapel. He wasn't wrong. Rage dries out a throat. Trust moves air. Fine, I said. You talk, I count. He nodded once, braced himself like a hinge, and shouldered through the low double doors into Omega Block. Omega Block is a square of rooms wrapped around a big shared hearth and washing vats, all under a ceiling that collects quiet. Right now it was full. People in work shirts and night coats and half-rolled sleeves packed shoulder to shoulder, faces pale with the kind of worry you get when you hear sirens and someone says gather in a nice voice. At the far end of the room, 2 acolytes in white were holding a prayer ribbon between them like a clothesline, hurting. Smiles on, palms up. Sisters, you're safe with us. Sisters, come. We'll move you where the king can't be forced to use you. Sisters, it's only for a little while. Stop, Jace said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice carries like a door bar slamming home. Every head turned. We're evacuating east, he said. He pointed, not to the acolytes, but to the corridor that leads to the old laundry wing Myra had repurposed after the flood 3 winters ago. Laundry block and root storage. Solid walls, double brace, no chapel vents. That's where you're going, right now. One of the acolytes tried to paste on polite offense. Forgive, she said, leaning soft on the word the way Seraphine does. The matron has prepared a blessed shelter in the... Matron just tried to use you as props, he said, and then she ran. Gasps, murmurs. A few faces snapped to me like, is that true, and please tell me we're allowed to believe it. It's true, I said. I watched her cut the wall open. I held up my wrist, just enough for the veil thread to catch lantern light. She started the sirens, I said. Not Aldrich, she's stirring the docks, she's calling it holy. That last word hit. You learn after enough winters in this place that holy is sometimes just a leash with lace on it. The room shifted. Instinct started to overrule training. Pairs, I said, raising my voice just enough. Nobody walks alone. Take blankets, not chests. Water, not plates. If it doesn't keep you warm or breathing, it can wait. That gave hands something to do. Bodies follow hands. I'll walk with them, one of the older women said, chin up. Her hair was still wet from laundry steam. She had soap on her forearms like pale cuffs. Who's posted at the end? Captain Lysa, Jace lied without hesitation. because using Lysa's name in your mouth is the fastest way to calm an Omega block. And Holt, with lists. Good, the woman said. Completely satisfied, she started snapping orders like laundry clips. You heard the boy. Pair up, boots on, shawls tight, Myra's wing, move. I heard 3 little kids start crying and stop halfway because they realized everyone around them was moving with purpose, not panic. It matters. The acolytes tried again. Sisters, please, the chapel has. Not tonight, the soap-armed woman said without looking at them. Go bless a wall. That was when I knew we were going to get them out. Jace leaned in. You count who's staying stubborn, he murmured. Yes. We worked the room, boots on, shawls, water skins, blankets pulled from bunks. A few treasured things, locket, folded scrap of fabric, a worn ribbon vanished into sleeves because fear makes you honest about what actually matters. I watched faces and hands. I marked who wouldn't meet my eyes when I said chapel, who flinched at Aldrich, who still glanced, hungry, at the white sleeves near the door. 4 like that. I memorized them. You can't save everyone if you don't clock the people who will open a door for holy at the worst second. Above us, a siren wailed again. Closer, this time shoving words into the howl. It took me a second to understand the shape. Then I heard it clean. Blood at the docks, the voice beneath the wail cried, carried by iron throat. The king has opened the gates tonight. The chapel calls witness. Defend the god's house. Defend the god's house. Jace's jaw went hard. He's not opening anything, I said. I know, he said. He's trying to stop them from doing exactly that thing, I said. I know, he said again. His eyes were already on the exit corridor. Still gets people killed if they believe it for 15 minutes. That was the math. Seraphine didn't have to win the night. She just had to burn enough trust that when dawn came, stability looked like letting her finish the job. Move, I told the room. They moved. We turned Omega Block into a slow, steady river. 2 lines, shoulder to shoulder, everyone touching someone, nobody alone. We pushed them out of the main hearth room, through the arch where the ceiling dips, past the wash basins and the racks of drying coats. Down the service passage that curves behind the kitchens and spits you toward Myra's wing. Myra's wing started as storage years ago, low ceilings, thick stone, 2 exits, no windows to the street, no chapel vents. She had the foresight to put cots there for cold snaps. Myra doesn't have foresight. She has memory sharpened into a weapon. Rhea, one of the girls whispered as I passed. Her eyes were still shiny from almost crying. Are we in trouble? Not yet, I said. Ask me again in an hour. That pulled a shaky smile. Good. Half the block was already in the service hall when we hit the first real resistance. A taller acolyte, older, higher rank, carrying an iron-bound scroll tube like a priest carries a reliquary, planted herself at the junction. By order of the High Matron, she said, voice pitched to Carrie, all Omega women will proceed to the sanctuary vault for their safety. Any deviation from holy direction is a mark against the accords and will. Jace didn't let her finish. By order of the king, he said, louder. All Omega families evacuate to Myra's wing right now and bar the door behind them. Dozens of faces turned between the 2 voices. Sanctuary, king, sanctuary, king. Time to break the tie. I stepped forward, lifted my wrist, and let the lantern catch the veil thread so it flashed silver for just a breath. I pitched my voice where the kids could understand it without anybody having to translate. Listen, I said. The matron just turned off the air in the oath hall and filled it with smoke. Gasps, an angry sound, a hiss. She tried to make you sit in it for her. She wanted you in those seats so she could point to you and say, look, I'm keeping them safe, while she strangled you soft and called it love. The acolyte drew in like I'd slapped her. How dare? She ran, I said over her, still calm. I watched her run. She's not walking any of you anywhere except in front of a story she's trying to sell. Now the room had something true to hold. They held it. I'm not asking, I said. I'm telling you where the air's clean, Myra's wing. You'll get hot soup and cots and Holt at the door. You'll be cheek to cheek and annoyed. You'll be alive. Go. The soap-armed woman from before said, "You heard the ledger." And that was it. River regained its current. The acolyte tried to plan again and got swept to the wall by 50 bodies that had decided their own safety wasn't up for discussion. Jace leaned in close enough that only she and I could hear. "If you keep trying to pull them," he told the acolyte, "I'll mark you as collar and Holt will treat you like equipment, not staff. Do you understand what that means?" Her throat worked. She stepped back. We moved again. One by one, groups vanished past the arch into Myra's wing. Shawls, blankets, a copper pot of water carried between two women like treasure. An older man with a limp we shouldn't technically have had in an Omega wing. Mates find ways around rules. They always have. Two half-asleep toddlers slumped on a barrel lid being dragged like a sled by a cousin with fire in her eyes. All of them breathing. All of them angry now, which is better than afraid. The sirens outside kept keening. In between the wails, that iron throat voice again. "Defend the god's house. The king has broken the accord. Defend the god's house." She was using the word defend, like a lit match in dry straw. "They're going to march on the docks," I said. "And on his banner," Jace said. "Anyone who's already angry at him is about to think they got permission from heaven to prove it with a crate hook." "Which means he's walking into fists that believe they're holy," I said. "Yeah," Jace said. We locked the east wing. The last pair in, soap-armed woman and a girl with a bandaged hand, shoved the bar down across the door like they'd been doing it their whole lives. Holt will add more braces when he gets here, but for now, solid. "Rhea," Jace said. I turned. His eyes flicked to my wrist. "How's your veil?" I pressed 2 fingers to the cloth. Cool, warm, still humming along my pulse. "Holding," I said. "Her funnels don't like my flavor tonight." "Good," he said, then his jaw shifted. "Because we're about to step into air, that does." "What do you mean?" He angled his head, listening. "Hear that?" At first I thought it was still the sirens. Then under the sirens I caught something thinner, higher, shivering through the stone like wire pulled tight. A bell, but not from any tower on our side. A traveling note. "Nocturne signal," I said. "Bridge," he said. "That's Valerian's rhythm." Before I could answer, a runner skidded around the corner, Omega boy, breathless, eyes huge. He still had flour on his sleeve from kitchen duty. Which meant Lysa had yanked whoever was in reach and told them to move. He held out a slip of folded parchment like it was on fire. "For you," he said to me, then sucked air like his ribs had forgotten how to do that on their own. I took it. The message was only 5 words, written in a clean, compact hand that wastes nothing. "The matron runs to the bell tower." Valerian. I felt the keep line up its next move around us, like a board waiting for a hand. "Where?" Jace asked, already bracing. "North Parapet," I said. "The old storm bell." "Of course she's going high," he muttered, "so she can preach over the sirens and call it truth." "And if she gets the storm bell," I said, "she won't need chapel vents or mirrors. She can speak to the whole ridge and call it holy." Jace met my eyes. "So," he said, calm, like we were about to go check inventory and not drag a fanatic off a tower in a storm, "what's the plan?" Valerian's message burned in my palm. "The matron runs to the bell tower." If Seraphine rang that storm bell, she'd rewrite the whole city in her voice. Valerian's words burned in my hand. "The matron runs to the bell tower." "North Parapet," I said. "Storm bell." Jace checked the east wing bar one more time, palm flat to wood as if he could lend it his spine. "Go," he told me. "I'm 2 breaths behind." We took the service stair to the roof walk. Rain came sideways, hard enough to find seams. The parapet stones sweated. Sirens wrote their long howl across Nightport. Under them other noises gathered, anger sound and crate hooks ringing against posts. Aldrich's side of the city pulled steady like a tide. I felt it more than saw it. Work has a weight. The bell tower rose out of the keep like a thought a builder couldn't take back. Narrow, steep, Iron ladder bolted into stone where the steps gave up and the weather finished the job. The wind punched my cloak. The veil on my wrist cooled, then warmed to match me again. Point edge spine, I told the storm. No theater. At the first landing, 2 figures stepped from shadow, white sleeves wet, prayer ribbons held like they could wrap and tame. Their shoes had felt on the soles, the kind that makes no sound. One reached for my forearm with a mother's touch. "Child," she said. I put my ledger in her hand instead. She took it by reflex. Weight surprised her. I stepped past while she remembered which role she was playing. The second woman moved to block. I dropped low, swept my boot once, tidy, and she found the step that wasn't there. She landed with a breath and not a scream. Good manners even now. "Go bless a wall," I said and climbed. The ladder slicked under my palms. Bells don't like being touched from the wrong end. Their iron remembered storms and made me earn each rung. Halfway up the shaft, resin kissed the back of my tongue, thin, cold, confident. Little bead lines had been stitched along the mortar seams where eyes don't bother to look. When lightning flashed, they winked back winter freckles. The veil cooled, then held. The hatch above stood open. Wind pushed it like a hand that wanted me to hurry. I rose into the belfry. The tower was a crib for weather. Stone ribs, cross braces shiny with age. The storm bell hung like a patient animal, mouth to the sea, clapper tied back with a leather strap that had been new this afternoon. Beyond, Nightport flickered, sirens, lanterns, rain. Wolves ran the ridge below like black ink lines, too busy to look up. Bell tower wolves. Our people spread along parapets, heads tipped to listen for orders that never needed shouting. She stood at the far side, between the bell mouth and the open louver, Seraphine. The shawl had gone dark with wet, clung to her like a wet vow. Over it she wore a crown, not the reliquary from the crypt, but its sister. Filigree of asterium, hair thin and hungry, tiny sockets set to bite. A bead lead ran from the circlet to the bell's yoke and another down the frame, into the stone throat of the tower. Every breath she took cooled the air. "Late," she said gently, as if we were women passing in a cloister and not standing inside the throat of her machine. "You ran," I said. "I prefer withdrew," she said. Her hand found the leather on the clapper and stroked it like a pet. "Truth loses under smoke. It is kinder to speak where air is honest." "You turn the chutes," I said. "Why does it matter?" she asked softly. "If the house coughs a little while, I save its soul." The crown tasted the storm and answered. A thin white tremor that ran from the bell yoke into the filigree. Not light, winter. It reached for the vowels in her mouth and carried them further than a throat should be able to throw sound. "You've already siphoned enough bend," I said. "You don't need the crown to kneel, you want the room to. You'll call it peace." "That is what it will be," she said, almost pitying. "Silence is peace when wolves are tired. The city will be grateful." "Engines love gratitude," I said. "It makes them cheaper to feed." Below us, one siren choked out. 2 remained, stubborn. The wind pried at the louvers. A blue bolt drew a stitch over the sea and pretended it had never been loud. Seraphine turned so the circlet's beads faced me fully. Up close I could see how tidy the work was. Tiny teeth, each with a letter carved where no one would read it. Saint names repurposed into switches. Under it her hair had been braided for this, the way you braid a child for high feast, precise and proud. Her eyes were kind. They always are when she is standing nearest the edge of a precipice she built herself. "Come," she said, and left the word broad enough to let many choices in. "Stand where the city can see your gentleness. The new king will need someone who can count without crying." She lifted a hand, a white, tidy mercy. "You already carry my work. Why pretend you don't like its balance?" "Whose crown?" I asked. "Say a name." She smiled. "Names are theater, rooms kneel for shape." "You don't have him," I said, and meant Aldrich, and meant every wolf under the ridge. "So you teach the room to kneel and tell him it's the same." A faint line wrote itself across the beadwork, where a winter had been running too long. The filigree craved fuel. She would ring again and let the stolen vows sit on the bell and then fan them out over Nightport until simple minds thought it was dawn already. "I could have loved you, child," she said, "had you stayed an accountant." I'm still an accountant, I said. I'm just counting you now. Wind punched the louver. Water sprayed the deck. My veil cooled against my skin, then matched me. The thread warmed. Stand with me, she said, softer now, coaxing like a candle. Stand beside the voice that will keep us from war. The new king will be grateful. You need not touch him. She almost smiled. You need only translate. You mean blunt his edges until he's pliant, I said. Do wolves not blunt claws on their children's skulls so they won't scar? She asked, so tender the tower almost believed her. Your tenderness has a siphon attached, I said. I stepped closer to the bell. Asterium dust salted the yoke, resin clung where hands often choked a rope. I set my palm near it, not on it. The cold reached and slid off the veil. A strange comfort, borrowed night, surrendered at dawn. Has any vow, I said aloud, not to a mirror but to the room, been set to ride this bell tonight like a sermon? I felt the answer come up through my bones from the frame. Yes, the bell doesn't lie. It likes feeling important too much to pretend nothing is happening when everything is. She watched my wrist, her mouth softened. Ah, she said, I wondered which nocturne trick you borrow. Signature, I said, not claim. A difference without a difference, she said. If you die in it, will it comfort you to know it was only a signature? I plan to live in it, I said. Her fingers tightened on the leather like any mother's would tighten on a child's hand before crossing a street. The filigree pulsed. The bead line to the yoke brightened. Don't, I said. Don't tell me not to ring my bell, she said gently and pulled. The clapper kissed iron, soft. The sound ran around the rim and out across Nightport like a shawl being shaken. Not loud, intimate. It threaded the siren howls and turned them sympathetic. On the ridge, a few heads lifted because bodies trust bells even when brains do not. The crown drank what answered. I felt it as a chill along my teeth and a pressure at my ears, the way you feel weather change underwater. The filigree's sockets lit the way frost lights a web. She pulled again, 2 measures apart, her preferred cadence. I breathed ribs narrow. I counted anchors. Place, object, ceremony, hands, the bell, the clapper strap, the bead lead, her wrist, the crown. Has any hand sworn to chapel set this crown to drink tonight? I asked the iron. The rope vibrated a yes under my palm like a string tuned, just past pleasant. I thought so, I said. She soothed the leather. You can still come stand where the city will forgive you in advance, she said, beside the voice that spares it. Spare it what? I asked. Choice, she said without lying. Feet hit the ladder below hard enough to complain. Late, Seraphine said again, and turned toward the hatch, lashes lowered, because she didn't need to see to know who carried that cadence in his bones. Jace came up out of the dark like a man climbing out of a river that had decided to be cruel. Shirt torn, blood at his side, not rushing, but there. He saw me. He saw the rope. He saw the crown. He set his boots where the deck was not as slick and found the angle that puts his body between me and every bad decision a house can make. Don't, he told Seraphine. I asked once, she said. I heard you, he said. Then kneel, she said, still kind. Give your oath to the room that wants to keep you. You do not need to say a name. Shape is enough. No, he said. He didn't raise his voice. He gripped the rope with his left hand because the tower wanted to throw him off and he wanted to make it work for the privilege. The crown didn't like the syllable. It threw cold at him, white, tidy, vicious. It ran from bead to bead and jumped like winter lightning to the rope where his hand was. He didn't let go. The burn wasn't fire. It was ice, that bit. It took his skin in a white kiss and printed a thin pattern filigree's echo along his palm and wrist. He held. The veil on my wrist cooled hard in sympathy and then steadied. Kneel, boy, Seraphine said, not kind now, delicate like a knife. No, he said again, steady as a bar set across a door. The crown brightened. The bead line to the yoke brightened. The tremor in the bell went near voice, the kind of humming that convinces uncertain minds they are hearing a person. Jace, I said, because saying always here would be cruel. He looked at me and almost smiled. the way he had in the corridor when he said quiet and asked for nothing. "I'm standing," he said softly, "not to win, to be exactly where a promise goes when it grows up." The filigree jumped again, worse, this time not to the rope but to the clapper, and from the clapper to the iron fitting in the deck, and from there to the brace where his hip pressed for balance. He shook with it once. He didn't go down. "Swear and it stops," Seraphine said. "No names needed, only shape." "No," he said for the last time. The crown spat a line of cold across his forearm and bit deep enough to leave a clean, white brand where the rain couldn't immediately argue it away. His jaw locked. He held anyway. Wind struck the louver so hard the bell moaned. Wolves on the ridge below lifted their heads as if the weather had said something worth answering. Seraphine's palm lifted the strap for a third pull. The cadence that teaches rooms to choose. Eyes on me. Kind again. Because she is never so dangerous as when she decides mercy is a better-looking weapon. Hook, Jace's hand bled white where the filigree had kissed it. He refused to swear and wouldn't let go of the rope. The crown reached for him again as Seraphine drew breath to ring. Seraphine lifted the strap for the third pull. Jace's left hand held the rope. His right forearm burned white where the filigree had kissed it. He didn't let go. Point, edge, spine, I told myself. No theater. I looked for the tool I needed. Every bell tower keeps one, small, almost shy, a signal pane set into the inner brace to certify storm rings when the big hall can't hear itself. The frame lived 2 steps left of the yoke, under an iron crosstie where wind rains dust. Someone had rubbed the brass recently. That was enough. "I see it," I said. Jace didn't take his eyes off Seraphine. "Do it." I crossed to the brace, palm open. The signal Oathglass is no bigger than a book cover, thick, squared, veined like ice. It listens to the bell when ordered. It listens to vows when asked correctly. Seraphine's fingers tightened on leather. The crown hummed. Bead lead brightened. "Child," she said, gentle like a shawl, "you can still stand where the city forgives you." "No," I said. "Witness." I set my left palm on the brace beside the pane and my right palm on the glass itself. The veil cooled, then warmed to match me. The pane tasted my pulse, decided I wasn't here to perform, and lifted a thin, pale thread. Listening. I spoke clean and slow, each clause nailed to this place, this object, this night. "I am Rhea Lynn of Ironville, Oathbound auditor under the Accords by the King's Rail." "Witness me." The pane breathed once. I bind my breath to the first measure of the Accords. No fealty or peace stands unless spoken by the living mouth of the speaker, to the name spoken, in this present place, without hidden art. The thread steadied. I add the keeper's clause. Any light, smoke, resin, wire, mirror, crown, or bell that pretends a vow not so spoken is false. Wind shoved the louvers. The bell moaned low in its throat. Jace's jaw locked. He held. "If I lie, let this glass refuse my pulse. If I speak the Accords, let this glass command this bell and break the false work." "Witness, obey." Seraphine pulled. The clapper kissed irons soft. The sound went out across Nightport like a secret. The signal pane flared from within, thin white fire under glass, and wrote a star of hairlines that did not crack. It ignited. "Bell," I said, spine in place, voice low. "Carry only free mouths. Here, now." The pane pushed back, not at me, but into the iron. A clean pressure I felt under my hand, running brace right arrow, yoke right arrow, clapper right arrow, strap. The bell's hum changed, losing the sweet that tricks rooms, keeping the plain. The sound that came off the rim turned honest, a tone that gives crowds nothing pretty to stand on. Seraphine felt it. Her eyes flicked, only once. But the crown answered with hunger, sucking at the bell's throat for fuel the bell wouldn't give. "Crown," I said to the filigree, to the bead lead that fed it. "Release what you hold. Return all vows to the mouths that spoke them." The pane brightened, another hairline. The veil at my wrist cooled hard and held. The bead lead wavered, like a wire stretched too tight, finally hearing its own pitch. Seraphine breathed one soft word. "Blasphemy." "No," I said. Audit. The backlash started small. A tremor ran along the bead lead from the yoke to the circlet. The tiny sockets set into the filigree, letters carved where no one reads them, lit one by one, not from outside, but inside, as if a remembered oath had found the way home and did not want to live there anymore. Down in the city, a siren stumbled. The iron throat tried to shout defend the god's house and came out with death, and then nothing but air. In the docks, a dozen men looked up like someone had removed a hand from the back of their necks. Seraphine tugged the strap and tried to pull the cadence back into her hands. The signal pane answered for the bell, white veins lifting and sinking, not cracking, commanding. The ring that left the iron was a plain note, carry only what is spoken here. It rolled the false shape off the sound like rain rolling chalk off slate. Jace held the rope. The crown hated his refusal and flung cold at his burned forearm again. He rocked a half step, caught himself on the deck brace, and did not kneel. "Let go," I said. "Not yet," he said, steady. "Now," I said, "I'll tie it." He trusted the instruction. He released with his burned hand, shifted grip with the left, gave me slack. I looped the strap twice through the iron eye beside the yoke and hitched it, clean, high, fast. The clapper stayed home. Seraphine could pull leather and get nothing. She changed tactics. The filigree's bead lead brightened, the lattice in the crown waking like a nest of thin winters, trying to turn the bell into a picture again. I pressed my palm flat to the small pane and set the last blade. "Has any vow this month been diverted from the crown to a name not spoken?" I asked it, point sure, edge sharp. The pane wrote a clear white hair, "Yes." "By hands sworn to chapel." Another hair, "Yes." Then under the accords purge the false. I breathed narrow. Return the bend, break the siphon. The signal pane went bright and stayed, not shattering, crazing in a perfect web that held. The force ran from the glass into the brace, then into the bell body like someone had flipped the sign on a current. The bead lead on the yoke snapped from taut to reversed. The filigree didn't spark. It whitened, frost racing along its letters, tiny sockets filling with the color of a winter that wanted out. Seraphine gasped, not pain, surprise. "Stop," she said, trying mercy again. "Child, stop, you don't know what you've—" "I know," I said. "Return the vows." Out in Nightport, the last siren swallowed its words like a man told to hush in a library. On the ridge, 3 wolf heads lifted in the rain. One bowed and turned, orders heard clean. Down in the oath hall, the big frame that had lost its face held steady. Lysa's voice would be the only bell there, and she knows how to count. The backlash climbed the circlet's leads and went through the crown, not fire, cold, a reversal of flow that forced every stolen thread to unlatch and run home. The filigree dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again, like a net realizing it no longer held anything but itself. Seraphine staggered a quarter step and set her hand to the bell frame. The tenderness finally left her voice. "You bound yourself to a mechanism you don't understand," she said. "It will break you with it." "If I lied," I said evenly, "it would have refused my pulse." The signal pane stayed bright and unbroken under my hand. She tried one last pull on the strapped clapper. It answered with the small knock of leather on iron and nothing else. The bell gave her no room to preach. The filigree made its choice. Hair-thin cracks traced the sockets, not an explosion, not a spray, a give. Tiny beads dusted onto her shawl and vanished in the rain. A letter on the circlet's rim, one of the saint names she'd repurposed as a switch, flaked and fell. The bead lead at the yoke parted with a sound like a string deciding to stop being useful. The crown lost its drink. Jace exhaled once like a man who'd been holding his breath inside stone. His burned forearm still glowed white where the pattern had printed, but the bite stopped taking. He kept his feet. Seraphine saw the moment she'd lost the room. She didn't scream. She looked at me the way a teacher looks at a student who just found the page the teacher had been hiding and then chose a new lesson. "This city will freeze without me," she said softly. "It just learned to breathe," I said. The signal pane began to dim. Work done, command seated. The hairlines it had written held like lace on iron. I pulled the short veil tail free from its knot and wound it once around Jace's wrist, under the worst of the white mark, not touching the raw edge. The cloth cooled, the thread warmed. His shoulders came down a fraction. "Can you move?" I asked. "I can stand where trouble comes first," he said. "Good," I said, trouble about to run. Seraphine did what wise enemies do when an engine stops loving them. She cut. A nail found a seam at the bell frame where a maintenance panel had been taught to pretend it was stone. She pulled. The hatch popped. Storm air punched up through the slit from the catwalk that runs under the louvers. She stepped back, white shawl dark, face kind again because she can't help it. "You've given the city choice," she said. "They will use it badly." "Counting is messy," I said, "but it's theirs." She slid into the slot and was gone, her torn bead lead trailing like thread. I tied the clapper strap off one more time, hard, then set my hand on the small pane until it felt my pulse again. The glow settled to a patient frost. "We go," I told Jace. He nodded. He wrapped his burned forearm tight to his ribs to keep Rain from bullying it and took the hatch first, because he was always going to. Nightport's sirens had fallen to a low, honest moan. The bell tower breathed like stone that had remembered it was a building, not a theater. The city waited for instructions it could trust. The bead lead lay snapped against the yoke. The crown's thin letters were cracked. Down the catwalk ahead, storm spray hammered the slats, and somewhere in that wet dark a white shawl moved. Seraphine was running. The catwalk spat rain at our faces and slammed spray through the louvers. Ahead, a white shawl cut left, then right, Seraphine, fast and sure on wet slats that would throw anyone else. "Left rail," Jace said, voice even, burned forearm clutched to his ribs under the strip of veil I'd tied. He took the front, shoulders squared to be the first wall. We hit the outer landing where the walkway T-bones around the bell base. Wind tried to push us into the dark. The sea shoved back from below. Seraphine hauled open a service panel in the tower's skin, slid through, and reappeared 2 spans farther on, using maintenance rungs no one loves. "Stop," I called. "It's over, the bell won't carry you." She didn't look back. "Bells aren't the only rooms that listen," she said, and kept moving. Night bent, silenced, as if someone had smoothed a hand over a pool and stilled the chop. Valerian stepped out from the bridge side and braced a palm against the wind. You could feel the line of his work pull taut across the gap, invisible moorings that caught the bell tower's breath and anchored the lingering asterium in place so it couldn't jump. "Your lanes are pinned," he said to Seraphine, not loud. "No more running charges." She glanced at him, then at my wrist. "Borrowed winter," she said softly, recognizing the veil thread. "Expensive trick for an auditor." "Worth it," I said. The catwalk jerked under us, not wind. A heavy shape hit the parapet at a run and climbed in one fluid motion, claws kissing stone and finding purchase where sane feet wouldn't. Aldrich came over the edge in wolf, rain carving rivers off his pelt, silver threaded through the rough at his neck like a constellation. He landed between Seraphine and the outer drop, head low, shoulders high, every inch of him saying enough. The ridge below answered. One long thread of howls rolled across the city and steadied. Dock sirens, starved of Seraphine's words by the countervow, thinned to a plain alarm. Work, not riot. Seraphine slowed. She faced the wolf. The crown, the second asterium circlet, sister to the reliquary below, sat wet and wanting on her hair. Close now, I saw the tiny sockets were half white with frost from the backlash I had driven through them. She lifted her chin. "Majesty," she said to Fur and Storm, "you needn't kneel. Only stand near the altar where peace will be kept. Your people are tired. I know how to let them rest." The wolf didn't blink. "Names are theater," she murmured. "Shape is what a city obeys. Stand with me. We will call this stability. Your auditor can count for both of us." "Stop selling him a room he didn't buy," I said. She finally looked at me. Rain polished her lashes. Kindness sat perfectly on her mouth. "Child," she said, almost tender, "you could have been great at quiet work." "I am," I said. "This is quiet work." Wind punched the louvers. Aldrich took one silent step toward her. Valerian's lifted hand didn't move, but the air held, no jumping lines, no resin tricks. Jace set himself at my shoulder, ruined forearm tight, good hand ready. I pointed at the crown. "Has that circlet held any vow not spoken by the mouth who gave it?" I asked the near iron, the deck brace. It didn't have a voice, but it carried the memory. Yes pulsed through the metal like a string plucked just once. "Then it doesn't belong on a head," I said. "No," Seraphine answered calmly. "It belongs on a throne." She lifted her hand toward the leather tie at the bell's clapper, forgot it was knotted off, and touched empty air like a habit. The veil cooled against my pulse, then matched me. I stepped in. Jace moved with me, half step back, body in the angle that keeps knives away from ribs. "Rhea," Valerian warned, not to stop me, just measuring distances. "I'm counting," I said. I took the last 2 planks and came up in front of her, close enough to see the tiny carved letters on each socket, saint names repurposed as switches. The white frost in them had settled into hairline cracks. Seraphine didn't back up. Her balance was excellent. "You can still stand by the new king," she said. "You never have to touch him. You can translate." "I already did," I said. He said no. Her kindness cooled. "Then kneel," she told me, so soft she might have been asking me to rest. "Let me carry the complication." "No," I said. I lifted my left forearm and laid the veil over my palm like a pad. "Has this crown been made to receive a name not written on it?" I asked the metal again. Yes hummed. "Release," I told the crown, simple as ledger ink. "Return what you hold. Refuse the head that would misuse you." She moved to slap my hand away. Jace caught her wrist, gentle iron. Rain slicked their fingers, they didn't slip. I went for the circlet. It fought like cold fights, no heat, only numb and bite. The veil muted it, the thread warmed with the contact, taking the worst of the chill. I slid 2 fingers under the filigree where hair had been braided to feed it, found the hidden clasp there, a tiny catch filed to look like prayer in metal. "Now," Valerian said softly, voice turned to a blade that doesn't need to be swung. Aldrich's wolf weight shifted. He blocked the only clear retreat leftward, toward the open run of the outer work. The city saw him, black and silver in the storm, king as fact, not performance. Seraphine felt the math shift. "Don't," she said, and for the first time some edge showed under her mercy. "Release," I said again and pressed the catch. The clasp gave. The crown's weight went from hungry to hollow in my hand, all the tiny sockets dimming at once as if the winter they held had decided to go home for good. The bead lead dangling from the circlet's edge cracked and fell, one clean snap, like a string changing its mind about being useful. Seraphine's balance did what balance does when the machine that lies for it stops lying. It misjudged. She overcorrected, just a half step, but the plank was wet, and beyond her heel the walkway dropped 3 body lengths to the lower roof. She flinched back from the wolf's steady bulk, found no rail, and vanished over the edge with a sound that was more breath than voice. "Rhea," Jace moved in reflex, hand out. "I've got her," Valerian said. Night caught. He didn't weave anything dramatic. He simply moved his braced hand from air to angle, and the wind under the eaves thickened for a blink, the way tide thickens where pilings stand. Seraphine hit a lower awning, slid, struck the second roof with a rolled shoulder, and came to rest against a gutter brace, hard but alive. The city saw it, not dead. Aldrich went over the parapet in one fluid launch. The wolf hit the lower roof, took the slope, and pinned her. No bite, just weight and a quiet, rumbling warning that travels bone better than speech. Guards poured from the stair hatch below, Holt at their lead, eyes up, taking orders from a single touch of the alpha's head. "Bind," Holt said, "rope, cuffs." No blood. "Public cell," he added, pitched for the courtyard to hear. "For a public reckoning." The courtyard had gathered despite the rain, pack and staff, dockmen who had followed the banner up the hill instead of the chapel down the street. They watched the binding. They watched the wolf stand off and give room, king and court visible at once. No theater, fact. I set the crown into the shallow salt pan. Valerian slid across the planks without being asked. Salt water took the last of the cold out of it. Frost lifted like breath on glass and was gone. The filigree looked small without its tricks. I covered it with the folded square of veil cloth we'd used on the bridge. "Jace," I said. "I'm standing," he answered. It was true. The white burn on his forearm had stopped eating. It would mark, but it would be his. We climbed down. Aldrich met us in the lower run of the roof. He was man again, no spectacle in the change, only a wet cloak thrown across his shoulders by someone who knows a cadence and a command. Water chased the line of his jaw. His eyes were exact. I lifted the pan. "Her crown," I said. "Evidence," he answered, and took it without flinching at the cold that now was. The stair to the court ran us into Myra's shadow before we had air to be tired. She stepped out under a gallery where rain couldn't bully her cane. Her face was rain-polished and unreadable. "Dowager," Seraphine said from the cobbles, rope at her wrists, voice pitched to sound weary and dignified at once. "You're dripping on my stone," Myra said. "Bind that shawl so it doesn't spread cold. We'll not have you make a prop out of pneumonia." A flick of her cane and the square around us arranged itself the way she likes. Witness enough to be unarguable, distance enough to be safe. Lysa on a step with a slate. Holt a yard away with the clean rope that marks a lawful tether. Guards at the four corners, doors open so the rain could watch. "Your matron is under arrest," Myra told the square, plain. "Charge perverting the accords with false work. There will be a formal reading at first light. Tonight we do not burn. Tonight we clean." She turned to Holt. "Purge." Holt didn't ask for a list. He already had one. "Vents open," he told his captains. "Collars pulled, resin scraped, oil dumped, salt water through every throat, yeast stacks and laundry lasts so we can breathe while we work. Any asterium found outside the tool chest goes in brine and stays there. Move." Men and women peeled off with the quiet speed of people who have done ugly jobs well before. Baskets, buckets, ropes, canvas sacks for anything sharp. No drama. Myra leveled the cane at Seraphine. "You'll sit in the public cell with the iron grate," she said. "You will be fed warm broth and nothing sweet. You will be watched by people who do not mind saying no. You will speak to no one except the scribe who writes down your words, and she has no patience for adjectives." Seraphine breathed in a way that suggested a prayer might be about to arrive if someone deserved it. None did. Myra turned to me. "Auditor," she said, "you will walk every room that breathes under her name and touch every hinge that learned new patience this year. If you need a wall open, you call a mason. If you need a door closed, you borrow Holt's rope. If you need someone to stop lying, you call me." "Yes, Dowager," I said. "Write it neat," she added, and a ghost of a smile thought about being born and decided the weather wasn't right. Valerian let the night moorings slacken. The bell tower exhaled. Somewhere farther down the ridge, a child cheered because the sirens had stopped behaving like nightmares and gone back to being tools. Aldrich held the salt pan with the crown and looked at his city. He did not raise his voice. "We're done with tricks," he said. "Go home, lock from the inside, drink water, sleep in twos. If someone knocks and says chapel, you say wolf. If someone knocks and says wolf and smells like candle smoke, you say no and throw a bucket." A few laughs, grateful, frayed. People want orders that look like a kitchen. He looked at me last, then at Jace. "Report at first light," he said. The look added breathe and eat and don't be proud without making a speech. We started to turn toward the inner stairs when the thread at my wrist pulled. One small, intimate tug, like a harp string being touched by a careful thumb. The veil bond warmed once, then cooled. The cloth loosened against my skin. The silver thread that tied it to itself sighed, and I felt the signature fade the way a tide pulls off sand. Not empty, exactly, absent. I could have cried if I'd had time and hadn't been me. Valerian's gaze met mine. He didn't ask if it had ended. He knew. Night is his instrument. 3 nights promised, I said. It did 3 nights work in one, he answered. It broke a crown's appetite and held a bell honest. That tally is fair. Thank you, I said, straight. He inclined his head, equally straight. Return accepted. Jace shifted his weight, reading me without asking. You good? I'm here, I said. Good enough, he said. We moved with the work, down corridor, through the sacristy where the first dampers were already coming off with scrape-hand salt, past 2 guards carrying a collar like a dead eel on a pole, through the nave where Lysa wrote down names of anyone who insisted they'd never liked incense anyway. The city smelled different, wet stone and soap, not sugar smoke. Behind us, under the gallery, Holt's team walked Seraphine to the cell with the iron grate and a stool made for long sitting. She didn't look back. She didn't have to. The room looked at her and knew exactly what it had seen. We reached the junction by the kitchen arch. Bread smell. Wet boots. The kind of honest steam that tells you life can be coaxed back into behaving. Aldrich came up beside us with the salt pan. He tipped it. We keep it under lock until the reading, he said. Then brine and lead. Good, I said. Rest 2 hours, he added. Then finish the purge. 2 hours, I agreed. He started away, then paused. Rhea. Yes. His mouth didn't move much. Mine to keep, he said, the way he had in the hall, with no theater, only stewardship, and went on. We stood in the border of warm and rain and let our lungs learn the new air. The veil on my wrist lay quiet, cloth now, not covenant. In the quiet after the sirens, the loosened thread slid free against my pulse, the veil bond gone with one last, aching pulse. Dawn would ask for receipts. The chapel would bleed resin into buckets, and the city would hear the accords read in a voice that wasn't borrowed. Dawn came honest. Wet stone, soap, and the low talk of people who slept in twos and kept the lamps small. We began in the courtyard, not the chapel. The public cell sat under the gallery with the iron grate and the plain stool, exactly as Myra wanted. Seraphine's shawl was bound so it wouldn't spread cold. A scribe waited with a slate and no patience for adjectives. Holt read the charge, perverting the accords with false work. Lysa read the record, collars, funnels, bead leads, diary lines. I set the salt pan with the crown on the step and lifted the veil cloth so the city could see the filigree without its tricks. No speeches. Fact. We walked from there to the oath hall. The great mirror's face was gone, only the black frame and the rail remained. We used the smaller signal pane from the bell tower, set in the brace behind the rail, and its thin, steady frost. Aldrich's voice did not rise. We renew the accords. I placed my palm to the rail. I am Rhea Lynn, Oathbound auditor of Ironville. Witness me. First measure. No fealty stands unless spoken by the living mouth to the name spoken, in this present place, without hidden art. Keeper's clause. Any light, smoke, resin, wire, mirror, crown, or bell that pretends a vow not so spoken is false. The pane kindled, clean white veins that held. No tremor, no tricks. One by one, the Omegas came first, by choice, not summons, and spoke their piece. I keep the bread, I keep the blankets, I keep the children warm, I withhold none of this from my neighbor. The pane wrote a small glow for each, tidy and equal. Myra stepped forward, cane bright in the morning. Wages adjusted to hazard, she said. Seats moved forward, Omegas in the first 2 benches when witnesses gather. No one calls them shield again without eating soup outside for a month. The hall wanted to cheer. We let them. Next, Aldrich lifted a short chain, a working chain, iron links bright, not a parade piece. Until the council votes, he said, Jace holds the beta's duties by deed. He keeps the hinge at the bad angles and commands the wall when I am elsewhere. Let it be written. Jace didn't smile. He only bowed once, spare, exact, and took his place at the right hand where a body becomes the first wall. We walked the beta house at midday. The old rooms smelled like locked years, old wood and paper. I opened my father's chest with Holt's key. Inside, ledgers, a broken ribbon from the quarry dispute, 3 letters that had wanted apology and never got it. I read enough to tell grief from guilt and placed the pack's IOUs in a new book with my hand at the top. Debts settled by labor, I wrote. No interest on winter. We carried the rest to the table and let sunlight count with us. When we were done, the beta house held tools and lists in air. No hidden altars, clean. Nocturne stood on the sky bridge at afternoon tide. Valerian handed me a folded, sealed page of ledger paper, his seal pressed clean. "For your drawer," he said. His eyes were night calm, the way water is when it decides not to drown you today. I broke it later, alone at the map table. There are more crowns, thirsting in the dark. Under it neatly, V. No flourish, no request, just the next column ready to be added when we were. He left with the tide, sleeves dry, taking his night with him. The bridge exhaled. By last light the purge was nearly done. Holt's crews dragged the last resin collars from vents like dead eels and dropped them in salt. Lysa wrote receipts for every bucket. The nave smelled like soap and water, not sugar smoke. In the courtyard, Myra watched men lever the chapel's outer doors off their pins and set them in the sun. "Wood remembers," she said. "Let it remember better." Night settled softer than it had any right to. No sirens, no theater, just roofs quiet. Aldrich found me in the map room. The banner was racked. The city lay chalked under my hand, cones, vents, routes, new lines, old mistakes. He didn't come close. He took the step that puts a man in your weather but not your pocket. "Report," he said. "Accords renewed," I said. "Omega's honored, collars brined, Beta House cleansed, the reliquary and the circlet in lock and brine until the reading." I tapped the paper he'd already signed. "Receipts match." He looked at me and did a thing that makes weary rooms believe in themselves again. He asked. "Rhea," he said, very plain, very private in the big room. "I want you to choose me, not as ledger, not as staff, as mine to keep." He let the words sit. Then he corrected himself the way a good man does when language matters. "Not keep," he said, softer. "Stand with me. If you want me, say it. If you don't, say that and I will be exactly the king you require." I could hear the courtyard breathe through the high slit. I could hear Jace, somewhere down the hall, teaching a young guard how to set his feet so his ribs don't get found. I could hear my own pulse where Valerian's veil had been. "Before I answer," I said, "I need one more thing set in record." He waited. "I keep the ledgers," I said. "I keep my name. I will put my palm on the rail when it hurts us, and I will not apologize for the math. If you order me to be quiet, I will refuse. If the room prefers theater to truth, I will make the rooms smaller." His mouth almost smiled. "Good," he said. "My house keeps better when the books talk back." "And if my name troubles your nobles," I added, "you plant the standard again and let it speak height while you use plain." He nodded once, agreed. "Then yes," I said, and felt it click into place like a latch that had been waiting for the right hand. "I choose you." He didn't reach for me. He let me cross to him. When I did, he set his hand to my wrist, over the quiet skin where the veil had been, and bowed his head to it. No crown, no stage, just a man learning how to hold without taking. "Mine to keep," he said, testing the old phrasing. "Ours to keep," I said, correcting the record. He laughed once low. It sounded like roofs remembering they can be warm. We walked out to the oath hall because endings belong in rooms that hold beginnings. The first two benches were full of shawls and elbows and tired smiles. Omegas, front and center, boots drying by the rail. Jace stood at the hinge Beta indeed, and watched the bad angles on my behalf as promised. He caught my eye, gave me a steady nod, and stepped half a pace back so the space beside me stayed mine. Dignity looks like that. A man who knows where to stand. Myra lifted her cane and let it touch the seam where the banner's haft had kissed stone the night before. "Accords," she said. We spoke them together, alpha, omega, guard, cook, child, clear and ordinary. The signal pane held its patient frost. No pictures, no theater, just oaths. When it was done, Aldrich glanced at Jace. "Hold the wall," he said. "Always," Jace answered, and took the angle that keeps knives honest. Valerian's seal lay folded in my pocket like a note you don't show to a room yet. More crowns thirsting. The ledger would have new columns. I could breathe with that. Later, lanterns low, map room quiet. I set a blank book beside the old one and wrote the first neat line in a hand I trusted. Year of the Storm Bell, accords renewed, tools labeled, doors honest, wolves and night at peace. He came to the threshold and stopped there, because some lines are meant to be stepped together. "Walk," he asked. "Work," I said, smiling. "Then walk." He leaned a shoulder to the frame and let me finish. I totaled the day. I closed the book. When I crossed to him, he didn't take my mouth. He took my hands, warm and human, and mine, and we stood like that under the map of a city that had decided to keep breathing. Outside, Nightport laid down its knives and counted roofs instead of wrongs. Inside, the ledgers waited on the table, hours, open to the page that would teach the next morning how to behave. And when the room asked for a last word, I gave it the only answer that ever keeps. Yes,